and welcome to this evening's Planning Commission meeting for the City of Pacifica, August 15th, 2016. Could we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Behringer.
Present.
Commissioner Evans.
Present.
Vice Chair Niblin.
Here.
Chair Gordon.
Here.
Commissioner Cooper.
Here.
Commissioner Campbell.
Here.
Commissioner Clifford.
Present.
We have all commissioners present and a quorum. Thank you.
Commissioner Clifford, please lead us in a salute to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Ooh, on to administrative business. We have an agenda that is of a certain order. Vice Chair Niblin.
I'd like to move approval of the order of the agenda.
Thank you. Commissioner Cooper.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Please vote. And that passes unanimously. Moving on to the minutes. We have minutes of August 1st, 2016. Commissioner Clifford.
I move to approve the minutes from August 1st, I believe it was.
Thank you very much. Vice Chair Niblin. I'm sorry, Commissioner Evans.
I'll second that. Before you vote, just want to let you know that I'll be abstaining.
And I as well. I was not at that meeting.
Okay, so noted. And that passes 5-0. Moving on to, is there a need for a liaison to the City Council meeting?
None needed.
Thank you very much. And now we're moving on to oral communications. This portion of the agenda is available to the public to address the Planning Commission on any issue within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Commission that is not on the agenda. Time allowed for any speaker is 3 minutes. If anyone's interested in addressing the Commission, fill out a card. I'm not seeing any cards, any interest, so I am moving on from that. On to the public hearings. There are 2 items. First one is a use permit, UP-77-16, filed by Julie Cox to construct 2 outdoor shower stalls in the rear yard behind an existing commercial suite at Pedro Point Shopping Center. The proposed outdoor showers would be an accessory use to the primary retail store. Recommended CEQA status is exempt, and the recommended action is to approve as conditioned. Could we have a staff report, please?
Good evening, Honourable Chair, Commissioners. I'm Assistant Planner Robert Smith, and the project that we're discussing is located within the commercial designation of the general plan and the C2 district community commercial district of the zoning code. The project is CEQA exempt on the basis that it's a minor development to an existing facility, with the thrust of the development, in this case, the introduction of the 2 shower stalls. They're within the rear yard of the existing commercial unit, that commercial unit being within the Pedro Point Shopping Centre. These stalls will be covered to avoid infiltration of stormwater into the city drainage system, and 1 stall will be constructed to comply with accessibility standards. The applicant will also improve the visual appearance of the rear area to make it more attractive for the visiting customers, and this service will be in addition to the main function as a retail store. The project is within the coastal zone. However, the project does not require consideration of a coastal development permit on the basis that the proposed use aligns with the definition in the coastal zone combining district of a visitor serving use, which by definition is commercial and recreational uses which provide goods and/or services needed by or of particular interest to visitors. The California Coastal Commission has confirmed this with the submission of a waiver for this particular application. The use permit is, however, required on the basis that the activity will be conducted outside the main portion of the existing structure. This requires the applicant to seek approval from the Planning Commission, and in considering the use permit, the Planning Commission must make 3 specific findings. The first one being that the use will not affect health, safety and welfare. The use is consistent with the general plan, zoning code and other city requirements, and that the use is consistent with the design guidelines. Staff believe that all these findings can be made with the proposal in its current form, and conditions included to ensure the detailed design of the project is in line with city requirements. Staff supports the recommendation for approval due to the additional visitor serving nature of the use, the associated betterment of the city, and the conformance with the city standards and requirements. Staff are available for question now, and the applicant is also in the audience should you have questions for them.
Thank you very much for that report. Commissioner Cooper.
Yeah, I have a question for you. This is a public area, public facility, and as far as access to, I would assume, restrooms and to other facilities. Do showers include as part of that public access, or is that a paid-for service, or is there no such item included?
The intention of the showers is that it would be a paid service as part of the retail function.
So they would have to actually request a ticket or whatever to go use the showers. It doesn't fall within any public bathroom code or anything else that you're aware of?
In terms of the actual built structure, that would be covered by the California Building Code, but in terms of the access to the showers, that would be something that would be administered by the retail shop.
Is there any other provisions that are going to be required of this facility as far as licensing, as far as health, or anything like that, because it is a shower facility, or is it exempt from any of those type of requirements?
I couldn't speak to the other city requirements beyond the building code and planning zoning requirements.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Behringer.
Good evening. I have a couple of questions. I'm just curious about why they're doing this. I was over there this afternoon, and it's kind of a nasty-looking alley back there. And one of my first questions to the applicant would be, are you planning on improving the entire alleyway back there? Because there's a lot of glass, there's a porta potty, there's overflowing trash cans. It's pretty nasty looking. I'm not sure how that works from a retail standpoint, or maybe they were planning on the people coming in from the front of the store, which creates, I guess, a whole lot of other operational issues. So I'm kind of curious about what they were thinking. The other piece is, if you're going to have a shower, there's no provision for changing rooms that I can see on here. So I'm not sure how that works mechanically. Maybe they can explain that to us. And I did have the public versus private question about, do you have to give public access? And that could get interesting, particularly back there. I also have some security questions about, if they're open till late at night, how are they going to light it and make sure that it's, if in fact the entrance is going to be off the alley, how they're going to, make that a safe place to walk, because it's got a big open field that's overgrown behind it. And I guess, do we get involved in water usage at all, or is that just, something that they're allowed to do if it's a zoning issue?
Yeah, there are a number of points there that the applicant may be able to speak to in more detail, but I'll certainly run through the individual.
Now, the other question I had, last one, I guess, I have two more. Is the applicant the landlord, or is the applicant the shop owner? Do you know?
Would be the shop owner.
Okay, so somehow or another the landlord needs to get involved in this, because you're affecting his parking use by adding square footage. And at some point, he needs to be involved, because I assume he's going to sign the conditional use, since he is the owner of the center, because it's going to be recorded and run with the land. So I assume the property owner is going to have to at some point approve all this. So, and then finally, on the parking, I was kind of curious, how did you count the 139 spaces? Because when I looked at, and maybe you guys are all smiling, it looks like half the lot over there's not even striped. So I don't know how you guys came up with 139. I think there may be more, I guess, is what I'm saying. So it may not be a parking issue at all, even though it is, but it's still a pretty close margin. If anybody else wanted to do that, he might be the next to last guy who could probably, add on to those buildings. I wasn't quite sure what the math was on how you did that, unless you've got the most current plot plan that shows the parking, but you might want to compare that to realistically what's happening. Those are my questions.
Okay, thank you. I'll start at the beginning, if that's okay. The first question was in terms of the rear area of the facility, the Pedro Point Shopping Centre. The applicant has been in communication with the landlord, and they are in discussions about improvement of that rear area, certainly access to the rear of the commercial unit. And again, that may be something that the applicant can speak to in a little bit more detail. The area for changing the individual shower stalls are designed so that the customers should be able to use that facility as an inclusive, an overall facility, so they can change within the shower stall, they can take the shower, and then they can emerge from it when they're finished.
Okay.
The public and private access, again, that's a question that we've already had. In terms of security in the evening use, the expectation is that the showers would be used in conjunction with the retail use. So we wouldn't necessarily expect to see the showers being used outside those retail operating hours. So from a security point of view, you would always expect a member of staff to be available to service the retail and the shower use at the same time.
Well, that goes back to the how they're planning and anticipating on accessing this. If they're going to go through that alley and it's dark at night, they're going to have to deal with that issue, or people just won't want to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
In terms of the water usage itself, there are standards from the county that deals with water uses, but the most salient point for ourselves is how the water is taken off the site and how the city drainage is affected by the stormwater. So they introduced the roof to the shower stalls to make sure that any stormwater doesn't infiltrate the drainage system, which is satisfactory. And back to the point about the landlord and that rear area, they're in discussions. From the parking perspective, obviously the figures are within the staff report, and we made a best judgment of the available parking spaces that there were on site, and also counted the number of tenants to come up with the figure for the parking spaces that were available. So and as you say, there does appear to be sufficient parking on that site.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Vice Chair Niblin.
Thank you. I think you probably have already touched on this or maybe even answered it adequately. I just had, I think as Commissioner Behringer was suggesting, some concerns that eventually you might reach a point where the last person to be able to do this is going to be, well, probably won't be this case, but there is what looks like a surplus at this point of 24 spaces. It looks like 3 or 4 additional spaces are needed for purposes of this project, but if enough tenants decided they wanted to do something like this, or just something else, is there some arrangement that the landlord has with each particular tenant with respect to how much parking is allocated to each tenant, or is it just kind of first come, first served, or?
Yeah, again, unfortunately, that's an issue that I wouldn't be able to speak to in terms of how the landlord operates the function of...
Well, maybe the applicant can tell us a little more about that.
Sure.
Okay, Commissioner Clifford.
Well, I've heard several of my questions already being asked, and so I'll just skip to the ones that haven't. The one question I have is the potential for a lot of sand to be getting into the drain system, and is there any plan or part of the plan for either sand or debris traps within the system?
There are no plans as yet. That is not necessarily something that would be required by the chief building official, but it is certainly something that he can work with the applicant with to ask for. I know that the building official has looked at these plans in great detail and provided comments, and the comments are included as condition 10. And he feels that there may not be sufficient depth in the drain to the rear to be able to incorporate some form of sediment capture. But again, it's something that he is aware of and will certainly be in discussion with the applicant about.
Be better to trap it and be able to clean it out than to have it plug the whole drain up and have to dig it up. And the other question I have is sort of around the health issue of multiple people using a shower. Is there some kind of plan in place for daily cleaning or a cleaning after X number of hours of operation? Or because I wouldn't want to go into a shower that 30 other people had been in before I got there, unless I knew that somebody had taken care of cleaning it up. So.
Sure. Sure,
That's-
and as a commercial use, the expectation is that the facilities will be kept in good order, but again, that may be something that the applicant could comment on.
And I have other questions, but they're for the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Cooper.
Yeah, Berenger and Commissioner Clifford asked a couple of the questions. The oil sand separator, you want something that the drain is nice and high because you're going to settle the sand down on the bottom, so that's probably not a non-issue. My other issue is that I would assume that that back alleyway is used for, or is available for, vehicular access. And so my question is what's to prevent someone from running that shower over and people inside it not knowing it's there? If there was a provision for some K-rail on the outside or something to prevent an incident like that happening, for someone speeding through the alley or whatever might happen, I think that that would probably be a nice provision to have. Was it?
Okay, I think that's it for questions for staff. So we're going to move on to an opportunity for the applicant to come up and address the commission. The applicants in the audience, you've got 10 minutes to talk.
Cool. Hi, guys. Good evening, and thank you for considering my application. My name is Julie Cox. My store is going to be called Traveler. It's going to be an outdoor-themed lifestyle shop. Think REI and anthropology combined, but smaller and cooler. My vision is to create a community hub that inspires people to use the hiking trails and beaches of Pacifica and experience and learn about the beauty of the surrounding area. The backyard space that I'd like to develop is an extension of the store, which will have a garden area and hot outdoor showers. Helping to improve the aesthetics of the Pedro Point Shopping Center and parking lot is also core to my mission, along with that back alley that we talked about, or that you guys talked about. Hiking and surfing in Pacifica have been my favorite things to do forever. I'm a member of the Pedro Point Surf Club and have past experience in hospitality, retail, and community building. I used to be the director of the California Surf Museum in Oceanside, California, and was a board member of the Visit Oceanside Tourism Bureau. Those roles helped me realize how much I enjoy sharing with others what is special about a place. And I'm really excited to open a store that highlights the amazing things that are going on in Pacifica. Thanks for your time, and happy to answer any questions that you guys have.
Thank you. Just hang out for a second. We'll field some questions from the commission for you.
Sure.
Okay? Commissioner Clifford.
Okay, how do you envision this shower situation operating? In terms of what I've read, it seems that the access is going to be from the rear. Is it also going to be through the shop?
I'm going to see how that goes. It's going to be from the rear for right now for like security issues and stuff, or at the back door of people going through the store with items or whatnot, going to the backyard, going back into the alley. I don't want that happening. So I envision people coming into the store and either buying a membership online and having a code that they enter when the gate opens, or I have a staff member back there with, they give their last name or their member code or, something like that. They come in through the back gate and use the facilities and change and stuff like that. So right now, through the back alleyway is the main part for the backyard facility.
That's how you envision it functioning, is through the back door with some form of entry card that people would use?
Not a card, because I don't want them to have anything while they're going surfing. The goal is to just be, free of.
But they would have an
items
entry code to enter.
That's not for sure yet. I'm either going to have a staff person there that's kind of helping maintain the backyard. To your question also too about maintenance of the showers, cleaning out the showers, sweeping up sand, making sure the little, I want to have a little foot bath for people to wash sand off before they get into the shower, that kind of a thing. So it could be staffed in the backyard as well. I'm kind of working out that detail right now. Staffing, big cost and stuff. So looking at that right now.
One more question. Have you considered any kind of just general security cameras to protect your clients back there?
Absolutely. ADT, bay alarm, safe and sound, Nest cameras, Piper NV. I've been researching a lot of the different cameras, and ways to keep everyone safe,
And
definitely.
respect of privacy at the same time.
Of course, no cameras in the showers, I've got the angle kind of figured out, and, I just want to see that back. I want to see, if anyone's going to climb over any fences, stuff like that. Also, to your point of the hours, it's going to be daylight hours is when the shop and the surf club is going to be open. No nighttime showers needed. So definitely, an early morning, maybe a 7 a.m. opening time, and then closing at dark, sunset.
Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, Commissioner Cooper.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions for you. I am also concerned about security. I'm concerned about your patrons being in the back and being followed in by somebody, or it being open to everybody, that someone finding the code and then you're now a public entity shower, which is not a good thing. But the other question I have for you is, are you planning to store anything here overnight as far as in this little area? I mean, wetsuits or anything like that? Or do you plan to bring those in every night? I mean, what is the sole purpose of this area? And I assume it's...
Yeah, so the backyard's gonna be showers and a little garden area for people to enjoy, maybe some outdoor furniture. I might have a surfboard or two back there. I haven't planned on that right now. I know that the neighbors have boards and stuff in the backyards, and so I know it can be done, but I'm gonna have most of my stuff inside. So no to the back, storing things in the backyard right now. The security issue, I too would be losing money, having people come through the back, taking showers, using all the water, I do not want that happening either. So, like I said, mentioned either a staff person or a code that's specific to one person. But it's very, it's a very real issue with that back entrance and having it be the correct people that are coming in and out, and patrons only.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Evans.
Thank you, Chair. Had a couple questions. One of them about the plumbing fauceting or handles, control handles. Are you having a timer or a hold on the water just so that somebody just doesn't leave it run constantly back there, or at night come in and, turn it on or something like that?
Right, good question. Right now, I was just going to have regular showers that you would use at home where it can stay on and be turned off. I've, looked into the chain style. I grew up working in the California state parks, and they always had in the bathrooms the two quarters to take a 5-minute hot shower. So I've always liked that thought. They get tokens or something to do their, and that's a way of restricting water as well. So again, as we get into the plans and get more into all the details, I'd like to have a thing that shuts it off, but right now it's going to stay on. That's my straightforward answer, but I'd like to have a timer.
Yeah, I'd really suggest that just for water's sake, if
Yeah.
nothing else. The other question I have is that backyard going to be fenced in? I know the enclosures will be closed, but is the backyard itself going to be fenced in?
Yeah, it's wooden fence all the way around, and then there's a wood and chain link fence that slides open right now, like a sliding gate. So yeah, it's all fenced in.
And this is kind of where you were planning on thinking about having a staff person to station back there for security and everything else, access and that?
Right at that opening of that sliding back gate.
Okay. And I guess there'll be area to get to your back gate safe and accessible for the patrons to come in. I know it's as we've said, it's a very cluttered area back there and could be quite unsafe if you don't step in the right spots and things like that. So how are you planning on addressing that issue?
Personally, going out and sweeping the back alley, picking up the trash that's, laying around. I know the landlord has a new property manager, so calling him up, whenever there's a pile of junk sitting there. Just kind of pulling weeds. I think just like small things like that will help just make the community nice back there. Maybe have a mural, nice, pretty mural done on the back fence or something like that. But I think just the small things of keeping it clean and having people coming in and out, that are not troublemakers. Not to say that there is right now, but just keeping it clean, really. And personally, and staff, having that be a part of their, routine.
I think the neighborhood would really appreciate that too, so, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Vice Chair Niblin.
Thank you. Just wanted to get a little better clarity on sort of the parking situation and kind of the, without getting too far into the weeds on it, but your, sort of the rights that, you have with respect to parking spaces, or is it just essentially first come, first served? That's just part of the lease you have? Do you see any issues there?
As far as I was told, or what I understand with Pacifica parking, it's there needs to be more square footage for restaurants and
Right.
sitting areas and stuff. So retail is lower parking space requirements. And so I know that I don't have the numbers right in front of me right now, but I know there's an overage of spaces that we have in that Pedro Point Shopping Center that the landlord owns. And then again, yeah, the side space. The people that are parking there right now are my target clients, so I'm not worried about parking because they're there already, and I
Right.
just want them to come in the store and use the services and get to know them, but yeah.
So from a contractual perspective, you don't see any issue between yourself and the landlord with respect to
Oh, no,
access
he-
to space you need, or the spaces you need?
No, he's really excited about the backyard and,
Excellent.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any more lights. Thank you very much.
Thanks, you guys. Appreciate it.
Sure. At this point, we're going to open up the public hearing. Anybody who wants to speak on this matter can do so, but you have to fill out a card, and you have 3 minutes. I don't see anybody who wants to speak about this, so we are going to close that public hearing and bring the matter back to the Planning Commission for deliberation. Commissioner Campbell.
Yeah, just in hearing from the applicant and in hearing her answers to all these questions, first off, it sounds like a great project. I'm not sure what it's replacing. Yeah, but it's replacing that a hair salon. So it's, it's already had a customer base that parked there once, so the parking issue doesn't seem to me to be an issue. I see the parking concerns in that lot, but I don't think this is going to elevate them. Anyways, it just looks like a good project. I'm in support of it and at this moment. Thanks.
Great. Commissioner Clifford.
Well, as I said earlier, I am still a little concerned about making sure that the showers are kept clean. It does sound like the applicant is certainly considering having a staff person back there, although that didn't sound like it was solid yet, which I can understand because there's going to be some pricing to keep somebody back there. It's going to be costly. The other thing I had brought up was the sand traps, because I am concerned about the sewer lines getting clogged up with sand. There's a tremendous amount that will be going through there, simply because people are coming right off the beach and showering. On the whole, I'm in favor of the project, and I certainly would love to see that alley cleaned. I was absolutely appalled when I went back there. Just as a little story on the side, I'm sure the other commissioners also saw the big grease bins. When I went back there, the lids were open and the odors were coming up out of those. It's not a pleasant thing when that's happening back there. So I'm hoping that the restaurants that are using those oil bins will take better care of keeping them closed. Yeah, I'm leaning towards voting for this at this point.
Okay, Commissioner Behringer.
Thank you. I'm in favor of the project. I continue to have concerns about how the back alleyway works, but somebody has to go first. Somebody has to take the first step to make the investment in an area, and a lot of times that leads to the neighbors on either side, following their example, and I think that could end up being some interesting space. They've got some work ahead of them, to make it, I think, inviting to the retail public to want to go back there, and they seem to have thought it out. They have a retail background. I think they certainly deserve an opportunity to have at it, and I'm in favor of the project.
Thank you. Vice Chair Neblin.
Yeah, I think like my colleagues, I'm in favor of this project, and there's obviously some practical issues that still need to get hammered out, but I think the applicant seems to have a really good handle on a vision and seems to be really addressing what I think is a need, and it sounds like staff is really spun up to work with the applicant. I think it's a good project and ought to be approved.
Commissioner Evans.
Thank you, Chair. I too am in favor. I would like to see some safeguards put in about the water turnoff issues, the safety issues, but most of all, like my other co-commissioner said, if we have somebody that's actually involved in doing a good business and a correct business and improve that area back there, that's a plus as far as I'm concerned. So I'm overall in favor. I'd just like to see also the sand traps. If we can get engineering involved, I know they said it might be possibly shallow, but need something in there. Otherwise, they're going to be calling out sewer all the time. So that's my thoughts.
Thank you, Commissioner Evans. I'll just say I'm also in favor of this project. Support budding entrepreneurs trying to think creatively and utilize the spaces they have. I think it's a great idea. The more people who start to use that back alleyway, it's going to result in general improvement. So I'm in favor of the project. Commissioner Cooper.
I agree with all my commissioners. I think there's a lot of concerns that we have, but I think in general someone has to be first, and I think that the applicant coming here today and with their shop and really putting the effort in to try to make something that's better for Pacifica, I think someone's got to go first, and I certainly think that that's a great opportunity. And obviously, having the support of the shopping center is certainly a plus. So I'm ready to make a motion if everybody. All right, I'll make a motion. I move that the Planning Commission finds the project is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, approves UP 77-16 by adopting the attached resolution, including conditions of approval in Attachment A, and incorporates all maps and testimonies into the record by reference.
Okay, Commissioner Campbell.
I'd like to second that motion.
Okay, please vote. And that motion passes unanimously. Anyone aggrieved by the action of the Planning Commission has 10 calendar days to appeal the decision in writing to the City Council. Okay, moving on to, well, congratulations. And moving on to the second and final public hearing. We've got a site development permit, PSD 814-16, filed by the property owner and applicant Mike O'Connell to construct a 3-story, 3,128 square foot single-family residence and remove more than 20 trees on a 39,049 square foot non-conforming lot at 1693 Higgins Way in Pacifica. Recommended CEQA status is exempt, and the recommended action is to approve as conditioned. Could we have a staff report, please?
My name is Ranu Agarwal, and I am the contract planner who worked on this project. So the project is for construction of a new 3,128 square foot 3-story residence on a steeply sloping lot on Higgins Way, which is at the southern fringe of the city. It is a non-conforming lot. The zoning on the property is single-family residential with a lot size overlay for B5, where the minimum lot size is an acre, and this lot is 39,049 square feet. Because it is a non-conforming lot, a site development permit is required. And there are certain findings that the Planning Commission has to make for a site development permit. A site development permit cannot be issued if the findings are that the project would create any of the following problems. That it creates vehicular or pedestrian traffic hazard, has hazardous access to off-street parking areas, that there are insufficient landscaped areas, that it restricts light and air on the property or surrounding properties, or it creates detriment to adjacent residential district, damage to natural features, and monotonous site and structure design, and the inconsistency with adopted design guidelines for the city, or that it is inconsistent with the general plan, local coastal plan, or other laws of the city. So as far as the general plan is concerned, the designation on this lot is open space residential and low density residential. The development is on the low density residential part of the site, and it is consistent with the 3 to 9 unit per acre densities which are prescribed for that designation. The unit proposed is a single unit, which is in a developed residential area, so it's not substantially going to create a lot of vehicular traffic. The road, the Higgins Way in front of the site, right now in front of the site is not improved, but it'll be improved for about 75 feet from where the pavement ends right now, for providing safe access. Then there is a garage which is close to the front property line, which is, according to the conditions of the project, would have to be located 10 feet from the property line. It provides for 2-car spaces and guest parking in the driveway. With regards to any damage to adjacent residential district, it is, again, low-density residential, and the scale of the development is such that it is in keeping with the surrounding residential areas. With regards to the design, staff found that there could be certain minor improvements made to the architecture of the building in the treatment of the exterior surfaces and the roof. And we wanted to get some input from Planning Commission on the recommendation staff has for changing the roof from a barrel roof, metal barrel roof, to possibly a sloping shingle roof, concrete tile, flat concrete tile roof. But the recommendation is that that Planning Commission approve the project as conditioned. And
Thank you, Ranu. Good evening, Honorable Commissioners. Associate Planner Christian Murdoch. I would like to supplement Ms. Agarwal's presentation with some discussion on an aspect of the project that is not customary for the Planning Commission to consider. You'll notice in the staff report that the Planning Commission has to consider approval of tree removal. In accordance with 2 ordinances regulating logging, the applicant has proposed removal of 37 eucalyptus trees on and around the site. Staff has recommended approval of removal of several of the trees, recommended disapproval of removal of several others, and seeks Planning Commission guidance on certain other trees. Staff's analysis is outlined on page 5 of the staff report and summarized in condition number 19. There is one tree, tree number 9, that requires special consideration. This tree straddles the property line with an adjacent property to the west. Staff sees a benefit to the project from removal of this tree and those immediately surrounding it for its potential to open a larger view of Lindemar Beach. If the Commission is inclined to grant approval to remove this tree, staff recommends amending condition number 19 to clarify that removal of the tree number 9 in the attachment E to the staff report, is contingent upon providing written proof satisfactory to the Planning Director that the adjacent property owner consents to its removal. One other point of clarification is whether any trees not approved for removal by the Commission may subsequently be removed by the applicant at a rate of 19 trees or fewer per year, which would be below the threshold in the logging ordinance. It is staff's interpretation of the city's regulations that removal of additional trees would not be permissible for 2 reasons. First, any remaining trees on the site would become landscaping as defined in the zoning regulations once the structure is built. And secondly, condition number 6 regulates landscaping for the project through Planning Director approval of a precise final landscaping plan. In order to clarify this, staff recommends revising condition number 6 to specify that all remaining trees not approved for removal shall be incorporated into the landscaping plan submitted for Planning Director approval, and revising condition number 19 to explicitly state that the applicant shall remove only those trees expressly authorized by the Commission. Lastly, I wanted to mention that staff received 1 public comment prior to the meeting, which staff forwarded to the Commission via email earlier today. That concludes staff's presentation, and we are available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Cooper.
Yeah, I'd like a little bit of clarification on, from our guest here on the concrete roof that we're supposed to consider versus the shingle roof.
No, actually, it is a metal barrel roof right
Okay.
now. And the recommendation was that Planning Commission consider possibly a flat concrete tile roof, which was pitched instead of a barrel roof.
And why would that be?
Because the residences in that area have special characteristic, which has to do with pitched roofs, which are either shingle or, which are either tile or shingle roofs, and just in terms of the color and the detailing on the exterior.
Was there, I know that there's a lot of tall trees around there for eucalyptus dropping leaves and everything else. Was that taken into consideration as far as what type of roof it is, or is it strictly an architectural element?
This was, from staff's point of view, an architectural element.
Architectural element.
I don't know.
And the commission will be aware that the orientation of these homes along Higgins Way on the northern half of Higgins Way are particularly visible from Lindemar Boulevard and throughout the community. They are elevated and highly visible, and so we feel that in this case it's particularly important that the structure be consistent and integral with the architecture of the other homes on the street.
Okay. The other question I had is, you've read off several conditions as far as what you'd like modified for your recommendation on the tree removal. At the end of the recommendation that you have here, at the end, would the site then be clear of these trees over a period of time? Is that what you're recommending? Or are you recommending no removal of certain trees outside the 100-foot limit, and that'll become the final landscape?
Well, staff defers to the Planning Commission's determination on which trees are appropriate for removal. What it's important for staff to communicate with the revisions described in the staff presentation was any trees not approved for removal, if there are any that are intended to remain, that it's explicit and clear that those trees may not be removed and that they be incorporated into the landscaping plan so that there's no ambiguity with respect to removing 19 or fewer trees in the future.
And so the recommendation to not remove certain trees was based on what assumption?
So the logging ordinances that the City Council adopted described the important public purposes for enactment of the ordinances, but they did not provide guidance, as is often the case in planning type permits with particular findings for their removal. And so staff wanted to try to incorporate an objective standard for Planning Commission consideration. It doesn't have to be the basis provided, which is the 30-foot and 100-foot buffer areas for wild and urban interface construction, but we thought it was a helpful starting point. Staff's recommended removal of the trees within the 30-foot buffer. It has left it up to the Planning Commission for those within the 100-foot buffer, but has not recommended either way, and then has not recommended approval of those beyond the 100-foot buffer.
So there, besides complying with the ordinance, there wasn't any thought to, it looks good for the area, it's better on landscaping, it's visually better, it just to comply with that ordinance, that was what you would recommend, so we don't have to go outside the regular obligation.
Well, in the staff report, staff remarked that they could see the benefits to removal of some of the trees, particularly in the northwest corner. They would expose and open a view to Lindemar Beach. But those, following this methodology that staff adopted, those are outside of the area where staff feels solidly comfortable recommending approval, but has sought commission guidance on whether or not to approve removal of the trees.
Okay. I have two more questions. Is that okay, Chair? The other question is that looking at the connection to the sewer, it looks like we're using an encroachment on someone else's land. Is that true?
That's not how I would characterize it. There is an existing easement dedicated for the benefit of this property and the property adjacent to install sewer lines at the rear of the property. Currently, the home next door to this site has encroached into the sewer easement as it's constructed, at least according to the plans. And so that has restricted the amount of the 10-foot easement that's available to the applicant to use. So if you may be referencing the comments submitted by the neighbor, it doesn't...
No, I'm referencing just when I look at the plan sheets. I look on sheet C 2.0 and, oh, I'm sorry, that's not the right one. C3.0, and I look at where I believe the property line is next to the person's house, that sanitary sewer line looks like it's on the edge of that easement. I guess my question would be, is that even constructible, depending on where that house is, because of the slope?
Understood. So yes, it's my understanding from speaking with the applicant that he's intending to situate it as far as possible away from the home, but within the existing easement. He was open to the idea of relocating it further from the structure, but that would be that would require the adjacent property owner to grant a private sewer easement. That's beyond the scope of this review.
I guess my concern would be that if we were to approve this project tonight, is that this sewer line, where it's shown and located, would be unable to be constructed if you were to undermine his complete foundation if you were to put it in, because this property owner has encroached upon the utility easement.
Right. So that issue did not come up in any of the review by city staff, that there was an opinion that this proposal was infeasible. It was staff's opinion that it was feasible to construct.
Okay.
We cannot completely rule that in or rule that out without detailed analysis of that, but on its face, it does not appear infeasible. And the applicant, I believe, has thoroughly considered this and can probably speak in greater detail.
And does the applicant pay for that sewer connection?
Yes.
Okay. I guess the other two questions I had was, I guess I want, the fire chief's here tonight, and I'd like to hear from him during the review comment to see if he's actually looked at this. And I do not know where the nearest fire hydrant is to this property. I didn't see any fire hydrant on this particular map, and I don't know where it is. So that's another question that I have. The other question I have is that, looking at this overall one, has anybody taken a look at that concrete ditch that I see on the far north side of C3.0? And I know that he's putting a lot of runoff water into this storm drain, or whatever he wants to call it. What does he call it? He calls it a subdrain. SD is usually storm drain, but it's a subdrain into this back area, and it's gonna get quite a bit of water, and I'm concerned that that water is gonna hit that ditch, and it's gonna overflow that ditch especially in the amount of trees that are up there and the amount of debris that's gonna get in there. So I was wondering if any consideration had been done on that.
Right. I can say, to the extent that staff has incorporated a condition of approval requiring a detailed engineering analysis of the drainage, that we have considered it, and we'll review it in greater detail during the building permit phase if this project is approved.
And then who maintains that concrete ditch in the back? It seems to be sit on it looks like some sort of easement.
I don't have any information with respect to who maintains that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have a full panoply of lights here, so I am just going to go across, starting with Commissioner Clifford.
Oh boy, I get to go first. I have more than one question, that's for sure. I had a question about the retaining wall that is proposed to be put into the right-of-way. I saw that there was somebody from engineering. I'm wondering if maybe they could answer my question on that.
Sure.
Rather than spewing it out and then having to do it again.
Good evening, Commissioner. Raymond Dunguines, Acting Senior Civil Engineer.
Hi, Raymond. Thank you for coming tonight. I really needed you here for answers. I see this retaining wall put into the public right-of-way, and I know that the roadway there is what, 50? The right-of-way is 50 feet?
Correct.
And the proposed roadway is 25?
We're requesting 26.
Requesting 20, 25, 20, or 26.6 or?
26 face of curb to face of curb, so that will allow two-way travel and a parking.
Okay. Is there, what would be the city's reason for allowing a retaining wall to be built within the public right-of-way rather than having the retaining wall built on the property owner's property and then leaving the right-of-way for public?
I think it's just the constructability and maybe the cost. Making the retaining walls further out will increase the length and the height of those retaining walls. And right now, the applicant has proposed the retaining walls at the location where it's shown in the map. And the city will require a maintenance agreement with the property owner that will run with the land to maintain these retaining walls.
And how far into the right-of-way is it going to be if it's approved?
It varies right now. I don't have the exact dimensions because I believe the plans that you have, I think, only shows a 22-foot width of the road, so it would have to be adjusted when the final plans come in.
Part of what I'm thinking is I'd like to see the some of the right-of-way partially developed in terms of a staging area and a place for construction trucks, a temporary improvement there within the right-of-way, but out of traffic's way, so those trucks and construction materials don't block a very narrow street that is almost a one-way street when you've got people parking along one side.
Correct. Yeah.
And
so
I don't know if that's is in anybody's thoughts or planning in terms of engineering, but it looks like there would be space to put in a temporary staging area, turnaround for the construction vehicles within the right-of-way, and then have that put back to its original state or to an improved state that has nothing to do with turnarounds.
Right. We haven't looked at the staging area portion. Probably the applicant can, say something more about that when the, actual construction, if this project is approved, what can be done.
I personally, I know that that's a very heavily used area for hikers, bikers, dog walkers, and also people riding horses up in there. So it's a heavily used area, and it needs, during construction, we need to think in terms of keeping those people safe.
Yes.
Still,
correct.
and not denying them access to the trail.
Yeah, we will look at further if this project is approved and when encroachment permit is applied for, that those concerns of yours will be taken care of.
Is there any way to look at it before we approve it so that we'd have some idea what was going to be done about it rather than just saying, okay, and you guys can go ahead and do it? I'm concerned about I'm greatly concerned about this because there's so many people that use that area, and there is no place else to put the construction materials. It's all downhill from there, basically.
You could
Chair.
go ahead.
Through the chair, there's condition number 24 states that the roadways will be maintained clear of construction materials, etc. So that addresses staging. So I think that perhaps the applicant can address Commissioner Clifford's question as to where he intended to stage this in light of condition 24, and perhaps he had comments on condition 24.
Excuse me, Tina, condition 24 is a standard condition, right? It pretty much shows up.
It is, yeah. So this is a unique situation given the slope of the lot. So I would like to hear what the applicant has to say about where the intended staging location is.
Thank you. And I'll leave the rest of my questions for later.
Okay. Thanks, Ray. Commissioner Campbell.
Yeah, I just wanted to get to one of Commissioner Cooper's points, or just emphasize. I just want to hear also from the fire chief about access to fire apparatus, and I see the conditions regarding the fire apparatus access road and the timing of installation, and looks like things will need to be installed before construction starts, which is great. But just want to make sure we hear from the battalion chief. Thanks.
Maybe it makes sense for the fire chief to come up now. Do you want to address your question.
Good evening, Deputy Chief Johnson. What can I do to help you?
How do you feel about fire access up in that area?
It's very, very tight, but we've made provisions for additional procedures. If you look at the conditions of approval, not only do we require the roadway to be in at the time or before construction, we also require the fire safety during construction, which requires that lane be open at all times and not blocked. So we don't have a real issue about being able to get in there if we need to. We did have an issue about turnaround, but we've solved that with another condition.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, I had one more question for the fire chief. Chair, do you mind? I'm looking at the slope from the front of the driveway down into the driveway itself. I can't read it properly, but looking at the plans and elevations, it looks like it's a pretty good dip down into that area. I'm just curious of how you plan to get back out of that driveway.
We have conditioned it to be no greater than 15% and a grooved concrete driveway for traction.
Does it currently show 18%?
Yes, it does.
So 15% would be the restriction, right? Okay. And you're comfortable with that turn off of Higgins Way into the driveway?
No, that is also conditioned. That inside radius turning in must be a 26-foot inside radius.
Inside radius, okay.
Yeah, that's also conditioned in there.
Do you have access to that gate for keys?
It is not locked now that we know of. We would cut it, but and again, a condition within here is that if that gate is replaced, it meet our response codes and also be locked with our knocks locked, so we can gain access to there.
Looking at the other park gates, it looks like it's a multiple lock system within that area. So
County locks are like that. They have multiple locks. Everybody puts their one lock on and take one lock off. The gate opens.
Okay.
So it'd be either similar to that, or what we do is do what's called a daisy chain, take a length of chain and just keep attaching locks together to lock it up that way.
So I guess a question to staff then would be, is that in the documents, who provides that gate? Is that simply a relocated gate, or are they going to upgrade that gate? Or are they going to put, we talked about horse access, because there is horse access. Right now, there's really not anything there for horse access. You kind of go around that tree, and if you're good, you can not unpedal, or unbuckle your pedals, but.
Sure. So to clarify, we had previously contemplated replacement of the gate, but we further evaluated and instead have conditioned relocation of the existing gate. So any improvements there with respect to a Knox box or improved locking system would be the city's responsibility. Currently, the conditions require the applicant simply to relocate the gate that's there currently.
And who has access to that gate? I mean, if I look at the access to that area, I would assume that, was it Golden Gate Recreational Area, or is the other person has access to that?
We believe it's the County of San Mateo Parks Department. Have not 100% confirmed that at this point.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. Vice Chair Neblin.
Thank you. I just had a real quick question. This is about the complete streets policy discussion on page 5 of the staff report. And this is really just speaking to the, I guess, the fair share reimbursement possibilities and with respect to development to the south and east. And I'm kind of curious about, what your thoughts are on how this might look if it were ever completely built out. And it's relevant, at least in my mind, as it pertains to some of the stuff we've discussed with respect to CEQA and the exemption there, and sort of the notion that there aren't any growth-inducing impacts that we're looking at. And at least one of the findings for the permit regarding traffic patterns and what have you, and maybe with respect to the use permit, we're just focused on the particular project and we're not really concerned about other projects that might come down the pike. But at least with respect to CEQA, I'm kind of interested in thoughts on the potential growth-inducing impacts and cumulative impacts as we look at that.
Sure. I'd like to first just remark on the extent of the improvements that are proposed and then defer to the planning director with respect to her future vision of how a reimbursement arrangement might work with future development. The right-of-way currently ends just before the westernmost property line for the subject site. And so the applicant obviously needs to extend the street to access his property and then connect it through the full width of the driveway. Staff has also incorporated a condition to require a further extension of 25 feet beyond the edge of the driveway to allow a safe backout maneuver. Beyond that, the gate that's currently at the trailhead would be relocated and stop the improved right-of-way at that point.
Right.
So the applicant's not improving the right-of-way beyond his immediate needs, and so we did not perceive that as an improvement that would have growth-inducing impacts, like completing a street connection, for example, that would create access to parcels where they're not, where there's not currently improved access.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Evans.
Thank you, Chair. To go back to that same question, Christian, I noticed that, okay, you said 25 or 26 feet beyond his driveway. I noticed on the plans, though, that the gate is right at the proposed location of the new location of the gate is right at the end of his driveway. Should that not be at the end of the paved street?
It should. So the plans in the commission's packet do not reflect the extent of the improvements recommended by staff in the conditions of approval.
Okay.
This was the applicant's conception of what he thought was necessary for the project, and staff has a different analysis and interpretation of those requirements.
I probably gathered so, but I wanted to get that out. The other question I have too is, now I know eucalyptus are not protected by our heritage laws or anything, rules on that. And that number 9 tree appears to be some controversy over whose property it's sitting on. Is there any definition? I mean, they can find out, but is there any definition on that? From what I was reading, it didn't sound like the neighbor wanted to cut down, but it was included into the ones that the applicant wanted to cut down. Is there any answer on that, or?
Well, the information that staff has is that the tree is located on the property line, meaning that it belongs to both property
sides,
owners.
yeah.
And so the question of whether the adjacent property owner consents to the approval, in my opinion, is beyond the scope of the commission's analysis.
Right.
It's my opinion and recommendation they should make the best decision on whether or not the tree should be removed, and then leave it to the property owners to present sufficient evidence that they both approve of its removal. Beyond that, you are correct that eucalyptus trees are not regulated under the Heritage Tree Ordinance, but through the city's logging ordinances, their removal has come for your consideration.
And that brings up perfect next question was, so the only reason not to take down these other trees is the logging ordinance rule about over 19 trees then, correct? I mean, the only reason the city, the staff does not want the rest of the trees cut down, as the applicant does, is the logging regulation, correct?
Well, staff has attempted to identify an objective standard for consideration of which trees to remove. There are subjective bases where the commission may find that removal of the other trees is appropriate. Following the 30-foot and 100-foot defensible space buffers, staff didn't see an objective reason to remove trees outside of those areas, and didn't see a strong case to remove those within the 30 to 100-foot buffer, but sought commission guidance on that.
Through the chair, if I could clarify something about
Yeah.
the logging ordinance. The logging ordinance does not prohibit the planning commission from approving removal of all the trees. It simply states that when you get to 20 and it's associated with a development project coming to the planning commission, that the planning commission should consider the request to remove 20 or more trees. So in staff's analysis, we were looking at the heavily vegetated nature of the area and trying to provide some objective standard for potentially keeping some of the trees. So the planning commission may not agree with that analysis, and so you are perfectly within your, ability as a commission to authorize removal of all of the trees or less or more. I just wanted to make that clear.
Well, I'm not against trees, but these are eucalyptus, which are very fire hazard type trees. And with things going on in Lower Lake as it is right now, that's a fear wherever there's forest at. So that was one of the reasons I was asking. I mean, even if he took down all his trees that he wanted to on his property, the property next door and behind him is, east and south of him is still got tons of trees on it. So I was more concerned about as to what the regulation was on that. So and we can override that apparently. So, okay. My next question is for the fire chief, if you could. I'm sorry to pull you back up again. Thank you,
Yes, sir.
Chief. I see some controversy about a turnaround. Are they requiring a turnaround in this?
It was conditional approval, and there's also a alternate means proposed.
So there is, I saw the condition there, and I see a rebuttal by the applicant. So that was bottom lines. I was trying to figure out if the turnaround is required
It is
under our
required.
condition of approval.
It is required unless he does the alternate means, which is basically following Chapter A, 7A.
And we've run into this before in other ones too, so thank you, appreciate it. I think that's all I have at the moment.
Okay, Commissioner Behringer.
Oh, thank you. I have kind of a different tact on the tree removal matter. And maybe this is a question council could answer, but if we're directing an applicant as to what trees we're going to allow them to remove and what trees we're not going to allow them to remove after we've all discussed it and come to some kind of conclusion. And I know there's a 30-foot and a 50-foot buffer, but if we have a 100-foot tree, and we're talking about eucalyptus trees, which are inherently unstable, they call them widowmakers for a reason, and the applicant wanted to remove that tree and we decided not to allow him and the tree fell over and damaged his residence, would we in any way have liability in connection with that?
No, there's immunities for decisions like this in favor of cities to protect against any claim of liability if one of those trees that you did not allow to be removed actually fell.
Okay, all right. That answers that question. The other one is on the hydrology for the drainage, because I have a similar concern about, is this a solid concrete driveway or is it a pervious?
My understanding is that the applicant has proposed a solid concrete driveway, and indeed, it would need to be grooved concrete in order to comply with the fire code requirements.
So they could get down to it. But I would think that's going to generate a pretty big delta on runoff, just in the driveway and the roof area.
It could, but typically, pervious pavement does not function particularly well at that significant of a slope anyways. The best practices are to install it in situations where the slope's no greater than 2% to allow the water to infiltrate rather than run off.
So you're not proposing any on-site retention in connection with that?
No. So the issues that you're raising are related to what's known as the C3 stormwater management requirements.
Right.
Under the city's permit, the regional permit that we participate in, projects of this type, single-family projects, are exempt from the low-impact development requirements, which require essentially full retention and treatment of stormwater runoff. Single-family projects are required to incorporate one sort of minor low-impact development standard. The applicant has a menu, if you will, to choose from, things like installing pervious pavement where it makes sense, directing downspouts to vegetated areas, installing rain barrels. So we've drafted a condition to allow the applicant discretion to choose one that's appropriate based on best management practices for their installation. But if the commission has a preference, perhaps it would.
Well, where I was headed, there could be a cumulative effect over time if there's additional development, if this spurs additional development downstream or on the other side of the road. At some point, the concrete swale is going to be overwhelmed, and I guess the last guy gets to bear the financial burden of that unless they share it slightly between each new project. In my mind, that's kind of ignoring it and putting the burden on the next guy in. I don't know that that's equitable, but that's just probably something to consider. I would like to see some type of minor on-site, retention, rather than just dumping it down into the concrete, which is where it's going to go at some point, right?
Presumably, it would go downhill into that drainage area.
Go uphill. Okay. The next question I have is relative to the fire. When I was out there this afternoon, there's a lot of people that park at the very end by the gate because it's closest to the gate. And and there's big SUVs, there's all kinds of cars, and so that 26-foot wide road all of a sudden is now maybe 10 or 12 feet wide. Would it be possible to restrict parking back at least 100, on-street parking 100 feet from that gate, to give you at least a clear, they could still park on the street, you know, down toward, that would be to the west, they could still park on the street there, but not at this end, so that you and the fire truck could have maneuverability there? Because you're not going to be able to make that turn if there are cars parked on the other side there. In the
immediate area of his development, there is no parking on either side of the street?
Well, there are people parking there all the time.
Well,
this afternoon.
There'll be signage up there saying it's a no parking zone.
Well, that is a no parking zone.
In front of his property, going back west, it's an existing condition that not much we can do about it. We can't condition his property on somebody else's property.
Well, but I think we should deal with the practical aspect of it. And I think right now, you know, if you look at where the gate is compared to where his driveway is, that's almost 100 feet from the new proposed gate, right?
Yep, and anything within that corridor that he's extending up to the end of his gate will have to be a no parking if it's 26 feet or less.
How the city could do it, but it just seems to me as a matter of common sense, it'd be something you'd want to think about doing.
Parking in the city is difficult,
Get in there
as
and
you know.
maneuver and do what you have to do. Yep. Fooling around with it when something bad happens.
Chair, I may see if the engineering division can comment on any proposed parking restrictions in that portion of the street.
Commissioners, condition of approval number 35, if any portion of the Higgins Way extension is to be an emergency fire or emergency vehicle turnaround, it shall be painted red and properly signed so that nobody will be parking there.
All right, and then my final question is, and this came up on another project that we were contemplating. How do we go about ensuring that there's only one dwelling unit built on this property? It's a pretty big parcel. Can we restrict it to a single dwelling unit at this point and basically ensure that there won't be an additional unit built at some point?
Well, the zoning and general plan designation for the site do not allow more than one dwelling unit per site. The city's regulations and state law allow development of a second dwelling unit, the so-called granny flat or in-law unit. So the city does not have a strong ability to prevent development of that type of dwelling unit, but there's no provision for a second primary unit to be built on this site under the existing regulations. In fact, this development is built on the portion that allows 3 to 9 units per acre,
right.
But the property beyond that's not proposed for development currently would require more than 5 acres per unit. So again, there's several layers of land use regulation that would not allow an additional primary unit on this site.
Okay.
In addition, if I could, the zoning, currently the overlay would not allow it to be further subdivided under the current zoning designation, in addition to the general plan.
No, I was thinking more of the granny flat approach, which is becoming more popular and ordinances are being changed, and then all of a sudden you end up with a granny flat in a neighborhood where I didn't see any that are there. It's not consistent with what the other developments have been done there, so.
I would say that could be the case, and the city would have a limited ability to deny an application for a second unit at that location.
They would, okay. Not even if it was deed restricted by virtue of this use permit?
That's correct.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Cooper.
I have a question for staff. I want to follow up on Commissioner Niblin's question. He had a really kind of an interesting comment, and that is the improvement of the street area in front of the property for future development. And it came up before where if you have an adjacent property owner and the initial property owner only develops, say, a quarter of the street, and then the following property owner would have to develop the 3/4 of the street in front of his property and his whole frontage of his road. And typically, we instill that there's like a sidewalk or a drainage has to be done in the entire front width of his property. What is our parameter here that we are only requiring 25 to 30? And I'm not saying that that's what he should do, but I'm kind of curious about what that obligation should be.
So we had a very in-depth internal conversation about this exact issue. So you were correct in that a typical, more typical size lot, 50 feet wide, 60 feet wide, there's typically a nexus and proportionality to require the entire street improvement in front of a dwelling. In this case, I believe that the entire frontage is about 270 feet of street improvements. And the proportionality of all of those improvements to serve this single home was not in proportion. We didn't have a nexus to require the entire frontage along this lot. And I think that I can't remember which other, maybe it was Vice Chair Niblin who brought this up, in terms of that would, I think there would be an argument certainly that may be a growth-inducing improvement. This is simply, we have nexus to require what's needed to serve this particular use.
I would further that and I guess question further this particular property owner versus the next property owner who owns the following parcel down the road. And I'm just curious of what is our standard as far as Planning Commission. We tend to want to be fair to everybody, and it seems to me that it may benefit this property owner more than the next property owner who would have to develop the other 200 feet plus his own property. So that discussion has been had?
Yeah. Yes, and I think you can argue that perhaps it may benefit this property owner because maybe guests have more street parking, but in terms of accessing the actual improvement, it's not necessary.
Is there a parcel beyond this one that could be developed?
Yes. It's not a similar type of lot, even though this is a large one. This is a vast lot. How big? Do you remember how big it is? It's.
I don't know, but it's many acres.
Yes, and the right-of-way stops. It doesn't continue through this property.
Okay.
That we're talking about.
The other question I had is for council is that, we're limiting again about the logging. If I was to look at trees 1 through 7, they're all on public right-of-way. So my question is are we having the applicant remove trees that are on public right-of-way? Is that part of the deal here?
Yes.
And then what is remove? These eucalyptus trees tend to want to continue to grow after you chop them down. So are we requesting a particular, hey, I want you to remove it 5 feet below grade, chop them off? What does that look like?
I don't have the particulars of the tree removal technique. Perhaps the Public Works Director could speak to the technique that's used for city projects. I don't know the full range of options for the removal.
And it follows in with, there's probably a different option on this roadside than there is going to be on the hillside. Obviously, leaving the stump in place is going to help the erosion control, but for this particular aspect, I can see those trees continuing to grow and grow and grow after you chop them down. That's just what they do. So I'm curious about that. The other question I had is back to the fire chief, is that where's that nearest fire hydrant to this property residence? Does it fall within the 300 feet or is it beyond that, or do they have to put a new one in?
They have to put one in within 200 feet of the end of the road, if there isn't one there already. So
Okay.
there will be a hydrant within 200 feet of where his pavement ends, including that 25 or 30 feet. So from that point back, if there is not a hydrant within that 200 feet,
Then they have to
he needs
provide
to install one.
Okay, great, thank you. That's all I had, Chair, thanks.
Is that it?
Yes, that's it.
Okay.
Is that enough?
Commissioner Clifford.
Thank you. I remembered one other question that I had. In reading the staff's report, I saw that there was going to be a geotech report on the retaining walls, but there didn't seem to be one on the whole site, just on the retaining walls. And, that's part of the question. And I also didn't see any kind of historical references to slides up in that area. I know that there have been slides in the past, not necessarily on this site, but I know that there have been slides on that hillside. And do we need to know whether or not this site could be prone to slides?
So I believe the condition you're referring to with respect to geotechnical analysis of the retaining walls in the right-of-way is a condition in the engineering division section of the recommended conditions of approval. There is also condition number 22, which I believe addresses your concerns about the main structure. That's in the building division section of questions, and so that is something that will be reviewed. And I would defer to the experts that prepare and review that analysis to evaluate the landslide risk for this development site.
Thank you very much for that.
Wait till it brings back.
Commissioner Evans.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry, I have one more question for staff. Under conditions of approval, number 14, can you explain that to me a little bit? Maybe it's just going over my head or I'm not reading it correctly.
Of course. So that gets to the point of the discussion that Commissioner Behringer and I had about stormwater runoff and selecting one minor measure for stormwater control. This is referring, items A through I are the menu that I had mentioned of pervious paving, downspouts directed to vegetated areas, rain barrels, and so forth, that the applicant can select to incorporate into the project to address stormwater runoff.
Thank you very much.
Commissioner Cooper.
Thank you, Chair. Hasn't he already done that on page 3.0, rain barrel for stormwater reuse?
Correct. So the applicant may choose to continue on with that particular feature.
Okay, so it's just he has to select one of those features?
That's correct.
The other question I had is there's a provision in here to use cedar shingles. I'm just kind of curious, he's on a slope. If there happened to be a fire, why would we require a flammable wood cedar siding? On condition 5.
If I may answer that?
Sure.
That is taken care of in the adjustment for the turnaround under 7A. That will not be allowed.
Okay. So condition 5 could not be allowed in the...
Right.
Okay.
Will not.
If I could maybe further clarify, the selection of that particular material was made on an architectural findings basis. You'll notice further in the conditions of approval related to what Chief Johnson mentioned, that the applicant, in lieu of installing a fire apparatus turnaround, has opted to incorporate the reduced or the improved building techniques of Chapter 7A of the California Building Code, which are non-flammable exterior materials, in addition to reduced openings and certain other technical aspects. So staff has tried to reconcile those two from an architectural standpoint and a fire performance standpoint, and said if the applicant builds to those wildland urban interface standards in Chapter 7A, that they'll incorporate a wood-like exterior material that has that appearance as close as possible and to the planning director's satisfaction.
Okay, it seems like we should just strike number 5 if it's an architectural. Okay, I understand what you're saying.
Okay, thank you very much, Fire Chief and Engineering Department. At this point, I think it makes sense for the applicant to come up and, given the complexity of this project, maybe typically we limit it to 10 minutes, but if it goes over, it goes over.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thanks for having me tonight. My name is Mike O'Connell, applicant for 1693 Higgins Way. This project has been a little bit of a roller coaster for everybody. I got a little bit out of sequence, and so I wanted to thank staff for getting us to the public hearing so quickly after that came to light. So I've been listening to your comments, and I think it's going to be easier if I just kind of address each one, because there are some things in there that I can probably talk better to than staff. So first, the question about the sewer. That sewer does not need to be very deep, and I've discussed this with the sewer department. Because it's in a landscaped area, it doesn't need to be 4 feet deep like a typical sewer would in a street. So that helps in respect to reducing the potential to undermine a foundation. If I can move that outside of the easement into a private sewer easement, I'm happy to do that. It would require that property owner to grant me an easement, so assuming that could be done in a timely fashion, it's totally fine with me. The only other caveat there is I would need to just confirm that I don't get so far down the hill with that sewer that I can't connect into the existing sewer main. There's also, if that can't be done, there's also ways to install sewers with trenchless technology. So you could use like a horizontal directional drill and not have an open cut trench, across the property that would have a larger excavation. So that's, something that's more expensive and atypical to do, but is a potential solution. So this ditch at the bottom of the property, it's a pretty wide concrete ditch, and it needs to be cleaned out. It's just overgrown with poison oak, and I've walked it. The concrete itself is in really good condition, and I reviewed that with the project geotechnical engineer because he had concerns about the ditch as well. So we went out there and looked at it, said the ditch looks like it's in pretty good shape, but it does need to get cleaned out. So that'll get done as part of the project. And it doesn't extend beyond, it actually terminates kind of near the eastern edge of my property. It doesn't extend to the adjacent properties, I think, like Commissioner Behringer was asking about. So whatever they do on that property, they'll use their own method to control drainage. Because that ditch is an easement, they would have the right to connect into that eventually, but at that point, it's kind of on them if it needs to get improved. Also regarding stormwater, we are proposing a dry well before we get to the ditch to kind of slow down that flow and, let the water that can infiltrate kind of percolate down. So that can help mitigate that. It's interesting, actually, in the geotech report, we have a design level geotechnical report. This project, there was actually a house approved here in 2006, full building improvement plans, and a design level geotechnical report that we've since updated. And that report actually references how well this particular property performed in the 82-83 El Nino. So I realize that may not be in your packet, but the drainage is pretty well controlled for a hillside like this. So I want to touch on the construction staging. That is a sensitive topic, and the way that I envision this going is we sort of need to start the construction from the bottom up. So there's a retaining wall that's north of the house that we need to build first, and then probably the house foundation goes in, and then there's another wall behind the house that's on the downhill side of the driveway, and then there's the wall on the uphill side of the driveway. So most of that initial work is going to happen down in the property, and it's not there's not a huge need for staging on the street. One thing that I think does need to be on the street is the concrete truck temporarily, because that's not going to get down to the bottom of the hill. The concrete's going to need to get pumped down to those lower elevations. Once the road is in, there's plenty of room for the driveway. There's plenty of room for like the tradespeople to park on that driveway. And so, I don't intend to like stockpile sheetrock and stuff in the public right-of-way. That'll happen down inside of the garage, and I think there's plenty of potential parking for the workers on the long driveway. You can fit 10 or 12 cars in there. So the gate, it's shown incorrectly. The relocated position of the gate is shown incorrectly on these plans. These plans were sort of determined complete, and then there were some additional discussions on things. So they're sort of reflected in the conditions, but not in the current drawing. So that gate would get moved to the end of the pavement. And my thought on the gate is that it would hug the sidewalk side, so that there would still be, I don't know exactly, but let's say 8 or 10 feet between the end of the gate post and the curb on the uphill side for horses and bikes to move through. And then obviously the pedestrians will have a sidewalk that they can use. So I think that addressed some of the questions you had, but a few other things that I did want to touch on. All the conditions are acceptable to me, except the one about the trees. I would like the flexibility to be able to remove all of the trees. I think that, it seems unusual to me. It seems like this ordinance we have about the trees is more than 20 or less than 20, but we have this kind of in-between situation. And I understand this is sort of the first time this has come up. I don't know if any of you remember this. I'm dating myself a little bit, but that ordinance came about when Alma Heights took out a bunch of eucalyptus trees, and there was a little bit of a panic. And there was an emergency ordinance about logging, and then it was sort of finalized about a year later. I don't know if any of you were around then or remember that, but that's sort of where that originated from. And they had a paper company actually that was taking out the trees. I didn't have such luck. I've called endless paper companies. But I don't care for the trees. I think they're a fire hazard. There's a lot of ecological groups that want to remove trees. The city of Oakland has spent like $6 million removing eucalyptus trees. Since 2013, they received some grant money from FEMA to do that. So a lot of cities are trying to, I guess, eradicate them. They're just invasive, and they're the most fire-intensive plant. If you do a little bit of research on them, they've actually evolved over time to sort of not die after the fire, and they keep growing. And so one of you mentioned that they will keep growing. So within the improvements, within the limits of the improvements, they would need to be removed completely, stumps and all. Outside of the limits of the improvements, you can treat the stumps so that it prevents future growth. And if that's done right away, it's proven to be pretty effective. It's got like a 95% effective rate. Yeah, they just leave a lot of leaves and bark on the ground, and it's, sort of messy. It's a lot of maintenance, and it's fuel for a fire. I grew up in Valimar, and I remember 2 huge eucalyptus trees came down and just destroyed houses. So one of my concerns is that, especially like trees 5, 6, and 7, that are sort of, if they fall, are probably landing on my house or my garage. But also for the downhill properties, the trees on the east, 29, 30, 33, 34, that group, there's some big trees in there, and they're tall. I haven't measured, so I don't know for sure if they would land on like the downhill neighbor's house, but that's kind of a concern that I have is them falling down. And when you start cutting them down, they sort of act better as a group with the wind load. They distribute the wind a little bit better, and they share that load. And a couple of the tree companies I've talked to, said that they recommend just taking them all out if there's not, they're not protected under the heritage tree ordinance for that reason, because they tend to be more likely to fall down when they're not in that big grove. The staff report suggested that they might be useful on the east side as a buffer to that property to the east, but there's like a 200-foot setback almost between my house and that property line, and I think that's a pretty sufficient buffer. Plus, that other property has like hundreds of trees on it, eucalyptus trees, that if they care to have a buffer, if 200 feet's not enough and they want the trees, there's plenty of trees that they can leave in place if they choose to do so. So another, I guess, advantage of removing the trees is I sort of picture restoring the natural hillside. And when I look around Pacifica, all the really cool hillsides, these rolling hills, they don't have eucalyptus trees, like up above like Crespi or Cabrillo School. So I just think that it would be nice to sort of remove the trees and then hydroseed the slope with like a native grass seed mixture and sort of, restore it to more of a natural state. The other reason I would like to remove some of the trees, especially the ones on the east side, is that you get really good morning light out of the east side, and you don't get great afternoon light here because the eucalyptus trees and the hills on the south side sort of shut the sun out really early, especially in the winter. So removing some of the trees on the east side would actually let a lot more sun in the morning. The roof. The staff report suggested, like a gable or a hipped roof with composite shingles to sort of match the other properties. And I think the difference between this property and the other properties is that the roof is actually lower than the street elevation. So, you sort of see a lot of the roof, right? If you're walking up there, you're going to be looking at the roof. And so I like the barrel roof because it's a little bit different. And when you're dealing with a hillside development, because of the height of the building ends up being, as you work your way down the hill, you're sort of limited to these low slope, roof options, short of just designing something with a really steep pitch and burying that third level in the roof. But because it's sort of a modern house, I feel like the gable doesn't quite go with that. And, the other option would be like a flat roof, but those end up with the tar and gravel roofing, and that's kind of, ugly to look at, and it's harder to maintain. There's more eucalyptus trees are going to get stuck up there, that material. So I happen to like the barrel roof. Okay, I think that's all I got, unless you guys have more questions.
Thank you. Yeah, we've got some questions for you, so just hang around there. Let's see. Commissioner Campbell.
Hi, yeah, I see the value in the removal of the eucalyptus trees. They're non-invasive and they're a fire hazard, and I like your idea of replacing them and substituting natural vegetation and tree coverage. So is there a way that we can memorialize that here?
Yes, I think so. Right? It's just we can change the condition or delete the condition, except tree number 9 can stay. I understand that's, a common property line, and if the neighbor feels strongly about it, I don't have any issue leaving that. It doesn't really impact the view, and if it falls on the neighbor's house down below and we get sued, then I guess we can share the cost, but.
Right. And here's just my only concern with removing all the trees is that we're coming under the single-family home exemption under CEQA. That's correct for this? And so if we're under the single-family home under CEQA, but it's not just construction of a home, but removal of 100 trees, I'm just worried about the precedential aspect of that, and I'm just curious what council's take on that would be.
Single-family home exemption is not just obviously for the construction of the home, but it's for the associated improvements or changes that would come with it. I don't see that this would necessarily create any precedent as far as the use of that exemption. I mean, each situation would be different, and so I think that you would have still the authority to rely on this exemption should you wish to, without making it necessary that you have to rely upon it. Again, if another project came around, the environmental analysis showed that the exemption wouldn't be appropriate for that application.
That gets at my concern is I don't want someone else to come in later and extend a home out into an area with a lot of vegetation, natural or invasive or otherwise, and then say, well, I'm going to come under the single-family home exemption. Also, I got to take out 100 trees around me for a fire break, and I still fall within that exemption.
Right, and the situation then would be, I think, that it'd be incumbent upon staff and anybody else with any concern about the environmental issues associated with that other application to bring to the commission the the environmental issues and the evidence that would support that, and if an exemption wasn't justified to establish the basis therefore.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Commissioner Evans.
Thank you, Chair. Question for the applicant. The number one, the roof. I'm not that dead set against that roof. I've seen a house on Hillcrest in Millbrae.
Yeah, you're not the first one to mention that particular house.
It's a beautiful, admittedly, it's very modern looking, but it's also very green. The whole house is green, and I think that gives the impression of that too. So I'm not real dead set against that roof. The question I have for you though is the setback on the garage.
That's changing to 10 feet.
Pardon?
It is changing to 10 feet.
Oh, it is.
That was an oversight on my part. We had done some iterations on the site plan and things moved around, and I didn't realize that. Yeah,
Good.
so
That
we'll
was-
shift that to 10 feet.
Yeah, that was my question was, were you acceptable to moving that back to the 10-foot?
Yep.
10-foot mark? Thank you very much.
I'll jump in here for a sec. I got some questions. I don't have a big issue with the roof or with the trees. I'm glad that you're sensitive to preserving access for all the trail users. And you mentioned that for the most part, people are going to be able to use the driveway. But you also mentioned that the cement truck would be there'd be a certain period of time where the cement truck would be on the street. Would that be inhibiting access, or I guess what's the word?
I don't think it's inhibiting access because legally in California the vehicle can only be 8 feet wide. So if it pulls up next to the edge of the sort of unimproved road, then I think there's adequate room for that. First thing to do is move the gate, right? So that you do buy yourself a place for the concrete truck to pull up at the edge of those improvements, because I don't want it staging in front of the neighbor's house, right? And I don't think that's an issue, and Chief Johnson can chime in if he wants, but it's until there's the combustible materials out there, like if I've got combustible materials, let's say the house is all framed up and then I want to pour the concrete for the driveway, maybe it's like one of the last things you do. At that point, it's going to be critical to coordinate, with the fire department, at least let them know. And this happens not very often in Pacifica, but we've done plenty of projects where we need to close a street temporarily to get a crane in to lift, hot tubs or really heavy steel beams. And so I think as long as it's coordinated with the fire department, it can be mitigated.
Okay, thanks.
Did I answer your question? I'm sorry.
It sounds like you're committed to doing everything you possibly can,
Absolutely.
given the safety restrictions, the safety limitations. That's good. That's good to know. Commissioner Clifford.
Well, I guess this is a question for both the applicant and staff, because I'm not sure how it would work. Just in case all of the trees aren't allowed to be cut down, would you be willing to take responsibility for keeping 5, 6, and 7 properly trimmed and maintained so that they wouldn't pose a risk to you and to staff? Is that something that the applicant could actually do in terms of maintaining trees in the public right-of-way?
So I really would like to remove 5, 6, and 7 out of all the trees.
I heard that.
And here's the reason. 7 especially, that's like a 48-inch diameter tree. 5 and 6 I think are smaller. They're like 12 inches, so they're not going to, come crashing down through my living room. But could I keep 5 and 6 and remove 7? And maintain 5 and 6?
I guess, but in terms of the maintenance question, if you were not allowed to take them all down, would you be willing to assume responsibility if the city would let you?
I'm not inclined to. Sure. I mean, they're the city's trees.
Thank you.
Commissioner Campbell?
Oh yeah, just to revisit the tree removal. Would you be good with a condition where it was a 1-to-1 replacement at least of bay or oak?
I've thought about that actually, and because I really do like oak trees, and that's just like the quintessential California tree. So I feel like I would be open to that, but I would want to know about what size you are expecting on the replacement. Just because there's a lot of them.
Provide that to you.
Well, are we talking about like a 60-inch box tree, or
No.
It's going to require maybe some sort of arborist, but the reason I bring that up is I did see that where the Berkeley that is taking down the trees and actually getting grants to do it, but they're doing it on the basis of basically a one.
I think it's a great idea.
Approval. So if we could get something in there where it's bay or oak in there on a 1-to-1 with a 90% success rate after 5 years, so that, you know, if one dies, you got to replace it, that would seems to me to be an adequate mitigation. And it kind of resolves my concerns about creating a big loophole. I mean, I understand what council's saying about not creating precedent, but I'm still worried about creating precedent sometimes, so.
I don't remember exactly how many oak trees I had proposed initially. I don't know, 7, 15, something. I can't remember the exact number, but there are some on the plans right now. So, yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Well, that would get my comfort level there as far as the CEQA concerns go for me. So,
Mr. Chair, I would, contrary to what we often strive for, which is a great deal of specificity and measurable conditions, in this case, I would have a little bit of reluctance specifying a 1-to-1 replacement with 37 oak trees on this parcel without an expert opinion of what's viable and what is appropriate to be planted. So if there's a willingness on the commission to entertain an arborist's opinion, with the maximum being 1-to-1, and trying to achieve as close to that as possible.
yeah, that would be, I think that'd be acceptable, because I know canopy is going to be an issue. And so if a mix of oak and bay, whatever's planted has a 90% success rate, that would be a good thing.
And how's that sounding to the applicant?
I think that sounds pretty good.
Thank you.
Commissioner Cooper.
Thank you for coming. I have a couple of questions for you. You spoke a little bit about that drainage, that concrete drainage ditch that's in the back. Where does that end up going?
It goes into sort of this funky old, really large catch basin with a wooden grate. And then I think there's a large diameter storm drain. I don't know exactly the pipe size, but it goes down between two properties on Paloux in an easement.
Is that one when you look up at Higgins, you go farther down the road and it's that wash that's created and eventually it ends up at the end there?
That is much further down than my property. That's much further down than that. That's on the adjacent 8-acre parcel.
Okay. I'm reluctant to ask this question because I've already asked it of the city, and I'll ask it of you. The improvements to the front of your property, again, I look at the adjacent property owner potentially wanting to develop that parcel, and I find it a little unfair that one applicant only has to improve the first portion of his property, and he's taking up the whole right-of-way, which is the full length of the frontage of your property. And I've noticed that you've planted trees along that entire length of area. How difficult would it be for you to put a sidewalk in that really is the frontage or a curb or something to contain that, so you potentially, if that road was to be developed farther beyond your property, it could be done? And I bring that up simply because I'm concerned with future development. I don't want to promote it, but I'm also don't want to be onerous to the following property owner.
Sure. So if I understand your concern, that the proposed trees may create a burden for the person who develops the road in the future. So I think that engineering has not signed off on the location of those trees because they are in the right-of-way. So I'm happy to move them. I think they would be better served on the downslope anyhow.
It's actually the opposite. It's actually where you've placed your trees looks like where it would be on the edge of a sidewalk. How burdensome would it be for you to put a sidewalk in that extends to the length of where your trees end up?
I think it would be burdensome. I think it creates more retaining walls. It's not like, building a sidewalk on Linamar Boulevard where it's flat as a pancake.
Because
it's hard. I don't know that exact lineal footage, so it's hard for me to.
Hard for you to get to that point.
Yeah, I'm not inclined to. That's my initial thought.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any more questions. Thank you very much for coming up. And at this point, we're going to open up the public hearing. Anybody who wants to speak on this matter should fill out one of these cards. And I'm going to, let's see, each speaker has 3 minutes. I'm going to call you up. And first is going to be Kirk Rosales. and then Karen Clark, and then Frank Gonzalez.
Good evening. My name is Kirk Rosales. I'm representing the Montessori School of Linda Mar at 1666 Higgins Way. We are concerned with the traffic and especially the, what is it called, the staging area, and for the vehicles on this street during this operation. We do run a business, a preschool, Montessori. We have about 70 families who use that street on Higgins on a daily basis, weekdays, of course. We are concerned about the traffic and especially large trucks. We have families who actually walk to school with their parents. You have little kids from the age from 2.5 to about 6 years old. So we really are concerned about this, about the staging area and the emergency access at the end of the street during this operation or during this construction. So that's my concern, and I was hoping we could get some answers or something. Another concern I do have is a disruption of class time during school hours. If there's going to be any large trucks or large machinery. We do have young nappers who take their lunch or nap time during the hours from 12:30 to 2:30, and that is a concern for us. And that's what I have.
Thank you very much. Okay. Next is Karen Clark.
Good evening. I live at 1677 Higgins Way, which is 4 houses down from the proposed project. My concerns are as follows. We have lived here since 2005. During the past 11 years, we have seen the number of recreational hikers, dog walkers, and bicyclists dramatically increase. This is due to several factors. Primarily, word has spread about this beautiful area through YouTube and social media, and people come from all over to use these trails. Dog walkers are also very limited to where they can walk their dogs off-leash in Pacifica, and Old San Pedro Mountain Trail is a popular place for them. Finally, we have horses and riders who come up from Shamrock Ranch, both during the week and weekends. All this activity has made our street extremely busy, not just during weekends when it is impossible to park, but during the week as well. The city of Pacifica put up signs a few years ago saying 2-hour parking only, but no one has ever come to enforce those laws. So my concerns revolve primarily around the situation of our almost one-way street, parking on one side only, and all the traffic, trucks, heavy loads, et cetera, that will be coming up each day. Several years ago, the city of Pacifica received a grant to designate our street as part of a bike trail, and therefore the street and part of Lower Adobe were paved nicely. There will be significant wear and tear on this road with the kind of construction that is being considered. The only turnaround currently is provided by the Montessori School. There is no place for construction vehicles to park, no turnaround except the Montessoris, and no place at all for emergency vehicles. We live in a severe fire zone with eucalyptus forest all around and across the street. What kind of stipulations will be put in place so that this is a safe situation for all involved? Finally, the school across the street is an integral part of our community. Both my children attended the school, and I am concerned about the traffic's impact on the families and children as they come to and from school every day. There are 70 families coming every day to drop off and pick up on a basically one-way street. The addition of all the traffic needed to build this house will directly affect all homes and the school itself. In conclusion, I would like to ask the Planning Commission to require that a suitable turnaround and parking area be built before the house is even started, so that it does not impact the neighbors and the school. And also, I would like to ask that if the street service is damaged by this construction, that there are stipulations for the road to be repaved. Finally, I would like reassurance that all safety precautions in removing that many trees will be taken, given that we are in a drought and in a fire zone. You had asked also about the fire hydrant. Currently, the fire hydrant is 1 house up from mine, so it's 3 houses down from the gate right now. Thank you.
Okay. Our last speaker is Frank Gonzalez.
Good evening, I'm Frank Gonzalez. I am the west side neighbor, directly adjacent to the property. Have you all received the few slides I put together? Yeah. Okay, so we have covered some of that tonight. We moved here about a year ago from Atlanta, Georgia. So we've had a year to observe the peculiar aspects of Higgins Way. You know, Higgins Way, it's a multi-use, very complex environment. You know, we talked about the horse riders, the bikers, at least 4 different types of people that use the street for different purposes. It is a narrow street. It's only 22 feet. I measured 22 feet 3 inches across my driveway, which means if you park a 5 by 16 SUV, you only have about 12 feet to negotiate. Therefore, my driveway, which is a wood frame driveway, is a de facto turning point. I try to steer people away and convince them that they should back out 200 feet and use the Montessori turnaround. But sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. We have a problem with emergency vehicles. Delivery vehicles from Amazon, FedEx, UPS, they have their 24-foot vehicles that are really hard to turn around. UPS and Amazon do back up to Montessori, but when you have Amazon contractors, that is a different story. They do pretty much what they want to. Higgins Way cannot currently support the additional load created by this proposal in terms of additional tenant traffic, their guest traffic, as well as the construction without developing a new road in front of the new property. Traffic analysis, we've talked about this before. Dog walkers, hikers, bikers, horseback riders. Persistent recreational traffic. In front of my property, I can park 5 cars back to back. Typically, one of them is one of mine. Either my son, my daughters that come from Oakland. Sometimes I'll need 3 of those spots. More than likely, I only use 1 because I keep my 2 cars in the garage. Everything else belongs to either a biker, dog walker, and so on. So I do a lot of sharing. And here's the fire engine that came to rescue a distressed biker last December. Blocked our access for about 2 hours. We get about 4 biker injuries per year, so that means 4 emergency vehicles have to access and potentially block the road. We need a fire engine and large rescue vehicle turnaround. We've discussed that before. That is really a solid requirement, I think. The school traffic from Montessori, it's real. They have 4 times where it's really busy. 7 a.m. daycare drop-off, 9 a.m. preschool drop-off, 3 p.m. Preschool pickup, and 5 p.m. daycare pickup. Traffic analysis. Construction events on the road. This Saturday, we had to wait 1 hour for a crane to be removed. Okay, I'm saying the current plan fails to consider a turnaround for safety vehicles and delivery trucks, the additional traffic load of the new property, road extension with proper lighting and utilities. I think we have 1 transformer close to Montessori that's servicing 5-6 houses. Maybe there's a new transformer that needs to be installed on a street light, hopefully. Additional on-street parking for new residents and construction crew. New residents, we have a use case for the new residents needs to be married couple, 2 cars. 2 adult children, 2 more cars, 4 cars. And possibly 2 additional spaces for guests. So in all this, potentially a 6-vehicle extra load on that part of the road. I cannot support that in front of my house. I'm fully booked. And not only that, but construction traffic during the build phase, parking for 3 work vans, 20-foot F25 homes, and a large delivery truck. That needs to be put in place before construction starts. I cannot support 3 large parking vans, let alone a concrete park. I thought about this for a little bit. still think that the proximity of that driveway to my driveway becomes a single. I don't know if we have that study in terms of the potential use case for extra vehicular loading on the property. How many tenants, how many guests, how many additional recreational traffic vehicles are going to be impacting that zone? What kind of impact that will have combined with the current loading that I have on my side. Not only my side, but it's 1689 and 1685 traffic.
Mr. Gonzalez, you just need to wrap up your comments.
Yeah.
You can just summarize, that'd be great.
All right. One more thing. One request. I want to keep number 9 tree, just smack down the middle of the line. And number 2, regarding the easement for the sewer line, I would like to be able to limit the distance of any trench digging to at least 10 feet from my foundation. Whether we do that through some special ruling on the easement, I don't know how to do it. There's about 25 feet between my foundation and a large eucalyptus, so we could probably run the sewer line right down the middle. That'd be about 12 feet from my foundation line. To summarize, the concerns are the lack of a turnaround at my end, the potential extra loading caused by the 2 driveways being so close, and getting full access to emergency vehicles and large, trucks and delivery entities.
Thank you. Okay, if anybody else wants to speak, now's the time. I don't see anybody else, any other cards, so we're going to close the public hearing and invite the applicant back up. You've got some time to address the issues that were raised by in the public comment section.
Okay, so I think the biggest thing to touch on that I'm hearing is the turnaround. And do I really have 3 minutes, or can I go longer?
You can go longer.
Okay, thank you. So we can go down like the rabbit hole of the legal exactions and all of this if you guys are interested in it, but essentially what it comes down to, and it's kind of what we discussed already, is that it has to be proportional to the impact of the development. So the traffic is created, by the school, by the recreational use, not by the new single-family home. So there are some ways that the parking, I think, could be improved, but it's sort of outside the scope of this public hearing. But a couple options are like an assessment district to raise funds for a turnaround that benefits everyone on the street, or permit parking would be sort of less infrastructure, right? So the parking on the street is restricted to the residents, and the people that want to use the trail are going to have to park somewhere else where it's not as impacted. And I don't know that that's like the perfect solution, but it's kind of moving the problem elsewhere a little bit, but maybe somewhere where it can sort of tolerate that, if that makes sense. Plus you're hiking or biking or walking, like you can go a little farther anyways, it's good for you. So I think that's all I'll say about the turnaround, unless we want to talk about it more. And then as far as like the staging and the construction noise, it's a temporary nuisance, I think. And, I know there are limitations on weekend work and the hours, and unfortunately that does not fall within like the nap time at the Montessori school. I don't know how noisy it's going to be from the school to the site. I know certain things are going to be louder than others, right? Like cutting down the trees is loud. I can hear people cut down the trees up at Higgins from my house, down the road. and I'm willing to work with everyone, you know, I don't, but it's a temporary, it's a 6 to 9 month, you know, duration. So probably some of which happens during the summer. I don't know if there's summer school or not, but, you know, we're open to working with the neighbors on the noise issue, and, you know, we can give them a heads up on when really noisy things are going to happen, you know, so it's not a surprise. And then regarding the sewer line, I think that's a good solution that Frank mentioned, you know, shifting it away from the foundation. And so I'm happy to do that, but I would need an easement from Frank for that sewer line. So assuming that can happen and, you know, there's adequate fall from my property to the existing sewer, that's not an issue. I know it's a hard thing to condition. It's kind of a private property matter, but it's an easy thing to do.
Okay, ready for some more questions? Hold on.
Oh.
Not so fast. Commissioner Cooper.
So just get back with the easement issue. It's really not an easement for you as much as it's going to be easement for the utility. And I think that's one thing that it shows on the plans is it's a utility easement. So whether or not he chooses to give you an easement, the utility wants to be able to service your easement. So I think it's a bigger issue than just moving it away from the foundation.
I'm sorry, I don't understand.
The easement is a utility easement. It's a utility easement for the utility to provide and to access their particular pipe. It's not necessarily your easement if you as a property owner were to get that easement. Am I correct there, Council?
It's a public, right now it's a public utility easement.
Yes.
So like the city has the right to install a public sewer main in that
Correct.
area. However, if I'm granted a private sewer easement, I'm no longer extending the public sewer main. I'm building my own private sewer main. And so I would need access to it, which would be through a clean out at my property line. The sewer access is pretty easy. Like, let's say you had to replace that line. Well, on a site like that, it might not even be economical to go out and dig it up. You might be replacing it with like the trenchless technology anyhow. So I understand that the easement would require access to be provided, and there's ways you can write an easement agreement that sort of, you know, describes the, I guess the boundaries for that access and when it can happen and notifications. And so it's not like there's a...
Yeah, my concern is not just for you. My concern is that it is a utility easement and it was encroached upon, and so I want to make sure that it's available for the person
public utilities.
Yeah,
yes.
for the person who actually installed it.
And maybe that's something Public Works can comment about, because I don't think there's another need for a public utility, right? Because that easement doesn't extend across my property. It's just, it was really built for the sewer, and they didn't, what happened was they stopped the sewer short, and they didn't get extended to my property in the 60s or whatever. I'm
sure you'll work that out. The noise issues, and I think the concern of Montessori is a genuine concern. I mean, as a parent of kids who are grown now, if my kid didn't sleep for 6 months, you would definitely hear about it. I think that to work with him on deliveries during that period of time, to limit your construction activities and also limit your parking there. I'm sure you could have your workers park down the street, and just to be a friendly neighbor would probably go a long ways, and really try to work with him on those deliveries. I'm concerned about backing up. I'm concerned about the little kids in the area. I know that unfortunately, when we dropped off kids, sometimes we double park to get our kids into school and to leave. If you have a construction vehicle coming up, and let's just say he's delivering sonotube that's very long for your caissons, how is he going to back up in time to let this poor parent out? It might take him 20 minutes to back up with getting someone to spot him, et cetera. So I just would work with the school and work with your construction activities to actually make that occur. And also limiting the construction activities from 12:30 to 2:30. I don't say you can't do construction activities, but certainly if you're doing something that in front of his area, or doing something very loud, chopping down trees, maybe you could work with him to say, hey, I won't do those activities during that period of time, or do limbing, or do something just to work with him on those activities. I'm not saying you have to. I'm just
that's a really hard thing to do. I mean, if it ends up costing more money, and then now the project takes 25% longer because you sort of do the quiet work 2 hours a day. Yeah.
And the other thing I think was important is the phasing portions of this work. You know, I had obviously I think that the roadway should be extended longer than what it currently is, but to do that any extension of that roadway first to allow people to get off that street. I mean, I really do feel for your neighbor who is there, whose driveway is all cracked because people chose to turn around in his driveway with heavy vehicles. It's very unfair, nor should the person use the Montessori turnaround because that's Montessori's turnaround. It's not a public turnaround. And I also agree with you that, hey, this is not your issue. It's a public issue as well. However, there is an extension of a roadway that I think that needs to be built. What that distance is still a question in my head. So those are my comments.
Thank you. I'll jump in because I've got some follow-up questions that relate to what Commissioner Cooper just asked. I do feel for Frank, but interestingly, his problem to some extent is going to become your problem.
Probably, yes.
And it's going to shift. And so, I used to frequent that area a lot, and right now do the plans show enough of width to be able to turn your vehicle around, or no?
Yes. Yeah.
You mean without without doing the back?
Oh, without a 3-point turn? No, that would require like a full cul-de-sac. Yeah.
Right.
But like you said, what'll happen is people will use, my driveway
nonstop.
Which is okay. I mean, that's like this driveway, the alignment is more conducive for that, and I understand why it would drive everyone else on that street crazy because someone's pulling into like your front yard to turn around, and like on this driveway, it's just, you're not going to notice because the house is sort of much lower and further away, so.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, any given Saturday or Sunday, that road, Higgins, especially up towards the gate, it's a free-for-all.
Plus, with the signage for the fire lane, it'll be this. You'll have more space to do a 3-point turn. So you're right. That is what'll happen. People will pick hopefully, the path of least resistance there, which is, drive down and do a 3-point turn in that area instead of a 5-point turn in the middle of the block, but you can't really predict that. But.
I guess all I'm saying is it's in your interest to make that as wide as possible, in front of the gate, the area in front of the gate, to facilitate people turning around, because so many people just drive back there not knowing it's a dead end, and they got to turn around, and then they're going to use your driveway.
Which is okay. I mean, most of that driveway is in the public right-of-way anyhow, and it's, because it has the retaining wall, it's supported on grade, so it doesn't create the same issue as Frank's driveway, which is like a bridge kind of. So for whatever that's worth.
Okay. Commissioner Behringer.
I just had a quick question. I'm noticing on the survey that the utility easement ends at his western property line. Is there a condition to extend that easement across the north end of his property to the eastern property line?
No, there's not.
That would be a good idea to do it.
I think that would.
Well, at this point, it's not clear to me what the nexus would be to provide an easement for the adjacent property owner as a result of this project. It's not a subdivision
to provide for future development, it would be mine. I mean, you're going to have to, otherwise, if someone wants to develop that is east of him, they're going to have to come to him and get a private easement. Now would be a good time just to put it in a location that is not going to interfere with what he's doing, and then provide for the future developer to be able to, to utilize that easement. Or you can have the utility company condemn it, either way, but I think it'd be better if you just did it now.
I don't disagree that good planning principles would probably call for that. Typically, that's something that would be accommodated in the subdivision arrangement for these easements for
well,
future
we're doing
utility
it ad hoc
purposes.
here, right?
This isn't a subdivision application, and so that's not something that we considered. I'm not sure we're prepared to make a recommendation for that at this point.
You're
this
not?
step. No.
That other property may have easements that go down in between the houses on Paloux. That would have to be looked at. But there's also the public right-of-way, which is Higgins, which is where they would need to get their utilities from. So,
but not sewer.
The main could be extended.
Well, unless they had an easement that went along your western property line so that someone could run it in Higgins if they wanted to.
The sewer main that's in that easement is pretty shallow, so the likelihood of them running a sewer line, you know, with adequate slope across my property that's 300 feet, you know, they're going to be 12 or 15 feet down, and that sewer line is like 4 feet deep.
I'm just concerned that, you know, we're doing this ad hoc. For example, the whole turnaround issue. If this were a guy doing a subdivision, you would have a cul-de-sac built and you'd figure out who's going to pay for it. And all we're doing is just kicking the can down the road. I mean, now's an opportunity to deal with it. I think his suggestion of an assessment district makes a lot of sense. I think anybody that has you know, they kind of share the pain in terms of solving a problem, because these guys are going to continue to bike and hike and walk dogs, and, you know, it shouldn't be his responsibility to bear the burden of the solution to that problem, in my opinion. So, you know, how this solution gets paid for is one issue, but I think we all in the room agree that it needs to happen. So I don't know if tonight's the night to have that conversation. I don't know, because to me it's an integral part, it's an important piece of approving your project.
I believe the assessment district, and Van can correct me if I'm wrong, requires a 2/3 vote of all of the, you know, properties that it would affect. So that seems like a challenging thing to discuss tonight with just 3 of the neighbors here. But then to go back to the easement question, I'm not opposed to it, but what makes me nervous is like granting a blanket easement for something that I don't, you know, we don't understand what that development is, how big the easement needs to be, you know, all the engineering involved in that, you know, but that's not to say that I'm not opposed to, you know, giving a neighbor an easement. I work in this industry, I'm a civil engineer, I understand those constraints, and I'm, you know, it's not like, screw you, you can't have an easement, but let's figure out something that's fair.
Well,
So, but it's a hard thing to do right now.
What I was going to say, normally it's not even a discussion. The easement is granted in connection with the approval, and it's a quid pro quo, and it's done all the time. That's why I'm kind of surprised that there's even a discussion. I was just asking the question as to why the easement stopped at your western property line, and now that you're here developing, I would think it should be extended so the next guy down, you know, has the ability to utilize that easement, and the utility company, I guess, always has the option of acquiring it through eminent domain if they want to. So I don't think you can stop it if someone wants to do it, if a utility company needs to extend it. But I'm more concerned about how we get around the turnaround issue, you know. I have a problem with it. I mean, I watched it this afternoon. If there had been some kind of an emergency issue, it would have been a problem. But it seems like...
But the emergency vehicles are going to have 75 feet of space to pull up, so they don't need to stop right out in front of Frank's house anymore. They can pull up in the 75-foot space.
Well, but they also have to navigate around 20 or 30 guys with bike racks doing 3-point turns and parking while their buddies are unloading their bikes and totally blocking the street, which I personally witnessed this afternoon on numerous occasions. So there is an issue there, and we're not solving it by, you know, ignoring it, I guess is what I'm saying. So I don't know why we can't just deal with it and either make it a condition of the approval or work out some equitable way for the cost of it to be shared from the people that are in that area. Because I don't think, conversely, I don't think it's fair for him to bear the entire burden of the cost of it. I think
I would love to see it. I would love to see it come up as an item on a future meeting and get, you know, more community input. Who kind of pull people on that street who would be interested in doing that.
Well, I mean, I'm even talking about parking and things like that, because these guys are parking everywhere.
Yeah, the permit parking would be a good trial. It would probably be, you know, inexpensive to do that, but, you know, again, part of it requires enforcement on the city's behalf. I think one of the speakers mentioned earlier, there is 2-hour parking there and it's never enforced.
Okay.
All right, Commissioner Campbell.
I did kind of want to get to the enforcement issue. Can we get increased code enforcement during this 9-month period of construction?
Code enforcement for?
Well, just making sure people are moving their cars
That would be police, because code enforcement doesn't enforce traffic and parking.
No, our code enforcement doesn't
You know,
That's
that
the police,
within the
oh.
right-of-way would be the police department. And I could mention this,
Okay.
Chief, but it would be,
Yeah.
It should start now. It shouldn't be just during the construction project. in
Well,
my
it should,
opinion.
yeah, right, it should be always, right?
I agree.
We've got in Valimar a street where people aren't supposed to park within 10 feet of the center line, and I've never seen it enforced ever. Yeah, well, is there, I feel the pain of the Montessori folks because they run a small business in town, but they've got a lot of people, customers who are coming at certain times, you know. So I guess with any school, I'd be concerned if something was going to happen that was going to delay traffic, let's say into Valimar for Valimar school, and that was going to totally disrupt traffic in the morning for pickup and delivery, because that would be a total, it's a nightmare, I think, for parents dropping their kids off and on and off schools. So I want to be equitable. Is there a way to maybe stagger your delivery times or something like that, so that, you know, there's no obstruction of just that drop-off times in the morning, so that they, you know, parents can come in, drop their kids off, get out, and then I think it's a discrete point of time. It's probably like half an hour.
Right. I think so. I think that's feasible. You know, there's always a little bit of a disconnect between, you know, okay, no deliveries between 7:30, and you call the, you know, steel company or whatever, and the guy shows up at 7:30 anyways, right? So, I mean, that's something that I can do, and I can get upset with the subcontractor. But I think it's just, you know, I don't know how else to limit it, really. Other than, you know, keeping that line of communication open, right? I mean, maybe one thing to do is to, you know, stop on Adobe or Rosita and like call ahead, right? Like, you know, pull over somewhere before there, call it in to the superintendent, and, you know, just say, okay, are we clear with the school? And it's like, yeah, okay, come on up.
Yeah, grab a cup of coffee.
Or wait 15 minutes.
Yeah,
right?
wait 15 minutes, because I could just see that being, that's just such a tough, it's just a unique thing, right? I mean, it's kind of like Valimar. Valamar's one huge cul-de-sac, right? It's one way in and one way out, but there's at least there's a place to turn around. Here it's one way out, one way in, one way out, and no place to turn. So it's just a funky situation.
Yeah, a lot of it is going to be diligence, you know, but I'm happy to employ a strategy like that where you just, you know, pull over on Rosita before you turn to go up Adobe and call, and, you know, make sure it's okay if you're like near that window. But that's just something that I know that, you know, the guy doing the delivery is going to forget. But hopefully they can get trained on that, right? Like, you know, the first couple times they don't do that. Well, we'll have a discussion about it, and, you know, hopefully it gets better. But
Is there also a way to just put those signs up in front of Montessori during the construction period that says no parking here between such
yeah,
and
I don't
such
think like the construction parking is, you know, that's all 2 hour anyway, so it's not going to do somebody who's there all day a lot of good to park there, or unless they just ignore the sign. But
yeah, not so much your construction parking, but just someplace, I don't know, to keep people off, but I don't know, a green loading zone. Is there a way to do that?
I believe there's already a loading zone in front of the Montessori school.
There is.
Yes.
Okay, well, I'm just trying to think, I understand, you know, that's a big deal. I mean, and a 9-month school year could actually just impact a lot of people. So.
And likely, you know, I'm not terribly interested in starting the project before the winter, so it's something that it's not going to start till April. And then I'm not sure if they do summer school, but hopefully, you know, part of that construction duration, and you're kind of in that middle where you've got, you know, a lot of deliveries, a lot of material showing up. It's sort of the rough-in part of the project, not the finish work, but the rough-in, and, you know, ideally that happens during the summer.
Well,
it's a hard thing to do, and it can be managed with, you know, open lines of communication. Everybody's got everybody's phone numbers. everybody's got my phone number and the contractor's phone number, and then like a backup contact in the event that they can't get in touch with me or the contractor, if that makes sense.
Right. I'll probably come back to it. Yeah, I know it's a difficult one, but I just feel their pain, so I want to figure out a way. If they're a small business owner, you got to be responsive to them too.
Commissioner Evans.
Thank you, Chair. How far down from your property is the Missouri school? And it's on the other side of the street.
It's on the other side of the street, and so that existing hydrant that's 3 houses down is like 205 feet away, and then I think there might be another 100 feet to Montessori. I'm not.
So it's 300 plus then from your property.
It's a little ways down.
Yeah, from your property line down to the school. So, okay. That was just more of a definition for me. The only thing I might suggest is don't put your post office or your mailbox post too close to your driveway if everybody's going to be using it now. It happens.
I think the mailman might like it there.
Yeah, leave it nice and wide.
P.O. box be the way to go.
Yeah, leave it nice and wide there, so, all right, thank you.
Okay, I thank you very much for fielding our questions. At this point, we're going to bring the discussion back to the commission for deliberations.
Chair, I have a request to take a short break.
Excellent. Okay, so let's take a 5-minute break.
I don't think they're going to go this way. I think there's enough attorneys up there.
So you say.
Can we start, everybody? Are we ready to go back online?
I would ask if it pleases the commission to wait a moment for the Assistant City Attorney to return.
What if we promise not to break any rules?
Maybe.
Okay, we are now resuming meeting. And at this point, we're bringing the discussion back to the Planning Commission for deliberations, and I see several lights up. Commissioner Clifford.
Well, I don't know if this is going to be well received or not, but right now, there are several things I would like to see, such as an arborist report. I would like to see the geotech report that was mentioned by the applicant. There are other things that I'd like to see. I don't know about other commissioners, but what I'm going to suggest is that at this point, we make a list of those things we might want to see and then continue the items so that we'll have all the data to make a really the best decision possible.
Okay, I'm just going to go in order here. Commissioner Campbell.
Well, I don't know about continuing or not. I'd like to winnow down any issues. As far as an arborist report goes, I felt okay with the notion that an arborist would come up with something that would be ecologically feasible for our approval, or not for our approval, for your approval, or for the consensus with the applicant, and that as long as it had a 90% success rate after 5 years. That was my only metric for things planted. If that's something that the rest of the commission feels is appropriate, I would be willing to go along with that. I don't know if that's something that needs to come back, or I wouldn't want to revisit it, I guess. And then the only other thing I'd want to just get some clarity on is just I just really want to avoid a situation where there's 70 parents getting up to that Montessori school in the morning, and there's like there's a slow-moving truck moving up the hill, or something related to the construction. Just because I think that just would be, I just want to avoid that kind of a disaster in the morning. And I could kind of, living in Valamar and seeing the traffic backups in front of Valamar School whenever there's something like that happening, and it's just always apocalyptic with the school drop-offs, and no one can get in, no one can get out. It's a total hazard, and I just don't want that to happen to the Montessori school like we see it pretty much every day at Valamar School as it exists right now, and that's with limited construction. God knows what'll happen if there's construction elsewhere that impacts that at some point. So anyway, I don't know if there's, maybe the applicant at some point can, put his thinking cap on and come up with a solution to that.
Commissioner Cooper.
And other than that, those are my two concerns. Other than that, I feel like the fire concern was another big one for me, but that's resolved. So.
Right, Chair. I agree with the comments, and again, I don't really have a problem with the trees. I like the development. I think that it's a beautiful home, and I think that it's well thought out. I would like to know again from Tina and from planning is that what is our policy on improvement of the frontage roads in front of developments? Because I know that on the developments that we've done in the past, including the apartment complexes, including these other developments, that any time we have a development on a road, we require them to put a sidewalk in or improve half the road in front or repave the road. So what is our policy on that?
Well, the policy is that the project would construct the entire road frontage in front of the project that is needed to serve that project. And I will defer, I know the city engineer is still here, perhaps. because this does have to do with the right-of-way improvements in front of properties.
You want to ask your question to the...
Yes, I would like to
Works
answer.
Engineering?
Thank you.
Good evening, Vano Campo, Director of Public
Yes,
Works.
I would like to know, what is the policy on improving right-of-way in front of a person's property when they choose to build a home or develop the place?
In most cases where it's an infill development, so to speak, there's an existing subdivision already, you're not really subdividing the property. It's the full frontage of the property up to the center line of the street.
Okay.
That is if it's an infill. What Planning Director Wermeister is trying to explain is that given the fact that this particular property has such a, I would say the side of, or the property line that's bordering Higgins is about 270 feet. What she's basically explaining is just, she's just trying to be equitable.
I understand. Thank you. That's all. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Vice Chair Neblin.
Thank you. I think I share the views of the commissioners, at least a couple of commissioners that have spoken so far. I like the project. I'm supportive of it. I'm okay, frankly, with the notion of taking out the eucalyptus trees, subject to what Commissioner Campbell was suggesting. I think that's sort of the notion of replacement trees. I'm similarly really concerned about sort of the construction-related impacts. I'm not necessarily of the view that a continuance is in order, but if we were going to, it seems that would afford the opportunity to perhaps see a well-thought-out, detailed plan to address construction-related impacts, so that we, as a commission, to the extent that that is a concern that we want to take on, we have, sort of the applicant's best thinking, and perhaps the opportunities for some coordination between the applicant and the neighbors to see what they can work out. I recognize that none of these things are cost-free, and they all add to the cost of the project, but perhaps, again, we could, if again we were going to continue it, not necessarily something I believe is necessary, because I think this could frankly take place, after an approval. Maybe a condition of approval that at least requires the development of some sort of a plan that's satisfactory to the planning director in her reasonable judgment. So, anyway, those are my thoughts.
Interesting thoughts. Commissioner Evans.
Thank you, Chair. One question I'm going to go back to staff about, or maybe yes, I'm not sure, about the roof question mark. We had put in a stipulation about the wanting to change to the hip roof or whatever the other style was from what it is. Where are we sitting at that right now? I mean, I guess that's up to us, really.
Yes.
So, well, then in that case, I repeat, I have no problem with design as it's designed. I know it doesn't fit, but as houses go along, I believe we're going to see more and more of that style. So I don't want to go backwards. I don't want, but I also don't want to not fit in. I think personally, I think it'd be fine. I'm not for the easement going across his property. The property east of him is a completely different world. If I'm not mistaken, it's one unit for 5 acres, I think, which no telling where that house may be. So I'm not in favor of making him put an easement through that property, just because it will be unknown as to where it's needed. The trees, I like Commissioner Campbell's idea for the trees. I don't know if it has to be 1 for 1, but it's a good place to start, especially with 90%. I'm not for a continuance. I think we have enough information, and we've certainly gone through a lot of information on this right now. I'm happy with staff's decisions and them working with the applicant. I think we've come a long way from original design, from what it sounds like, fireproofing and things like that. So I'm very pleased with it, but I don't know if I'm ready for a continuance. I don't think we need to go to that extent, but that's my thoughts right now.
Okay, Commissioner Behringer.
Thank you. I'm generally in favor of the project. I like it, but I do have some concerns. I'm fine with the tree removal, except for the notorious tree number 9. We can allow that to continue to live and generate oxygen. And I'd leave it up. I have all the confidence in our staff's ability to come up with a plan that makes sense and is a reasonable ratio of replacement, whatever that may be. And if they need to go to get additional resources like arborists or professionals or landscape architects, I'm sure they'll do that. And I don't think there'll ever be a better time to remove those trees than prior to the construction of the structure, when if they fall the wrong way, generally nothing bad happens. The roof design, I don't have a problem with it. I like it. I think it looks good. And one of the things I like about architecture in Pacifica is that it's pretty diverse. I mean, even the little Lindemar ranchers have, a multitude of different kinds of approaches, and I like that. And I think we live in a community where people like to have the ability to be creative. And at the end of the day, it's going to be this gentleman's house, and I think he ought to have some flexibility in the design aesthetic. So I'm okay with the barrel roof. I do think the hydrant, if there is a hydrant extension required, I think that should be the first thing that happens on this project, so that if there is a fire, at least we've got, a hydrant there that we can get to. I also believe that staff can negotiate a construction-related coordination agreement with the homeowner. I think that you guys can come up with some way for them to pay attention to their neighbors in the community, particularly the Montessori school. And there will be traffic issues. That's life in the big city, but whatever we can do to mitigate it as much as we can, I think we definitely should try to do that. But I continue to struggle with the whole turnaround issue and ignoring it. And I don't know that a continuance is going to change it, but for the record, I believe that we should deal with it. It should be required. He should have to do it. And then the next guy in, if it needs to be extended down, then he can pay for it. So that way we are kind of kicking the can down the road, but at least we're allowing this gentleman to go forward with his project. And yes, it will be an additional expense, but I think long-term it'll probably make it'll be a huge benefit to the community if there's a need to try to allocate that cost over the rest of the community. I know you probably can't do it after the fact, but I think it's important that you take care of that now, because it was pretty crazy this afternoon when I was there, and this was a Monday afternoon. It wasn't even a weekend. I didn't go back over the weekend, but I guarantee you it's probably worse than it was today. So I think the turnaround should be included into the conditions. I may be the only guy that feels that way, but that's how I feel. And I think it's a great project. It's a good house. It's beautiful. And again, I think it'll spur other people, to want to develop in the area as well.
Thank you, Commissioner. All right, I'll go. It's interesting. For such a complicated project, there seems to be pretty clear consensus right now from the commission, and I think I want to bounce some things off of you guys that could possibly work its way into a motion. So I'm definitely hearing consensus, which I agree with, that there's not an objection to removing the trees with the exception of number 9. And so, but it sounds like that would be subject to some kind of plan that's a tree replacement-ish sort of thing, where it's a maximum of 1-to-1 depending on what the arborist recommends. That's kind of, what would that look like, Tina?
I have a condition drafted. So condition number 19 would be revised to state that the required landscape plan shall provide for a 1-to-1 replacement of the eucalyptus trees with California native tree varieties such as oak or bay trees. The exact number of trees shall be determined by a licensed arborist, but shall strive to achieve the 1-to-1 replacement ratio to the satisfaction of the planning director. The trees shall also have a 90% success rate at 5 years past building permit final.
That sounds great. All right. So, okay. And then moving on to another area of consensus that I was hearing was some kind of traffic coordination plan.
I have one for that too. I'm trying to balance not being the referee, but also getting what the commission would like to happen. So the applicant shall prepare a construction delivery schedule to include arrival of major construction equipment as well as materials in consultation with the Montessori School to include provision of applicant and general contractor mobile contact information in addition to the actual schedule. And the written schedule shall be submitted to the planning director.
Great, okay. Those are both great ideas. So I'm also in favor of the project. I think it's great. It looks really good. I'm familiar with the builder's past work, and I've got a lot of confidence in him. I think the roof is great. The only issue for me also is it's the turnaround issue. It's that street. Anybody who's been on that street knows that a turnaround is so desperately needed, and there's a lot of I understand I hear that it's not fair to burden the applicant with with something that would be beneficial to that entire block. I don't know how to solve it. I just know that it's an issue. So I'm open to, and I don't see the need necessarily for a continuance either. I think that we can handle these issues right now, hopefully. Okay, that's it for me. Commissioner Clifford.
Well, since we're weighing in on the trees, first I will say, like everybody else, I like the roof. I think it's a good roof. I think the look of the building is a good building. I do like the project. The trees, I certainly could go along with something that approximates a one-for-one exchange for the replacement of the trees, except for, of course, number 9. I do have a question about would the applicant be required under that condition to replace 5, 6, and 7, which aren't on his property?
1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, 6, and 7.
Well, these down here are coming out simply because he has to get into the driveway.
Not on his property.
But I'm talking about 5, 6, and 7, which wouldn't be on his property, but would be removed based on what we've been saying. So,
In terms of replacement, is that what
Further
you're asking
replacement.
specifically? They're not on his property. I defer to the commission on that.
What say the applicant?
Can I jump in? Yeah, that's fine. It's 7 trees.
would replace.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
They get watered just like everybody else's, all the other trees.
Yes. Do they need to be in the right of way, or is that something that can be worked out? I know there are some questions about that location.
We can work it out.
I think they could be potentially anywhere in a place that makes sense, and maybe they potentially wouldn't be torn out later.
They wouldn't have to go exactly where the trees are that are being removed, but we would have to have tree replacement trees somewhere along that right-of-way. That work for everybody?
Yep.
Thank you.
And through the chair, if I could reread 19, because I left out the first sentence that includes this tree number 9, just so it's clear for the record, that the applicant, so we revised to state, the applicant may remove all eucalyptus trees on site except tree number 9, which shall not be removed without written agreement of the owner of the property to the west. And then everything else I had already read, so just to make sure that that condition's fully stated.
Great. Yes, you may.
Question, now, will that change also include the 3 trees we just talked about? I want to make sure that that's codified, not just a verbal agreement between the commission and the applicant.
How about all the eucalyptus trees on site, including and trees 5, 6, and 7?
Thank you.
Dan wanted me to make it clear that if the replacement trees for 5, 6, and 7 are in the right of way, then then I maintain them. If the replacement trees for 5, 6, and 7 end up in the right-of-way, then it would be part of the maintenance agreement for like the retaining walls for the driveway.
So I could add a sentence that if any replacement trees are in the right-of-way, they shall be maintained by the property, the applicant.
Sounds good.
Pursuant to a maintenance agreement.
Correct, yeah. Although we may try to keep them out of the right-of-way to avoid that, but if they need to
Yes.
go there, then we can deal with it.
Yes. We're making sausage here. It's not pretty.
I wasn't quite done.
Go for it.
I am also in agreement that we need to figure out something about the turnaround.
Commissioner Cooper.
Thank you. I just, the idea of not having the applicant provide the improvements to the frontage of his property is my sticking point. And without that type of precedent, or setting that type of precedence of not requiring that, I think is going to hurt us in the future. And that is a sticking point for me. So for that, I like everything else about the project, but that's one Achilles heel that I have on the project. So
can you articulate what you would like to see?
Well, I think that, obviously it's a large frontage, and that is part of the precedence that we set, is you should develop the frontage of your property if you in fact want to build on it. And yes, it is a big burden, but it is part of developing at the end of a street. And so the next person that comes down, we are putting them in a poor situation if they somehow want to develop that or et cetera, and to be inflexible on providing that, I think is not a very good precedence to set. So if I'm looking at it from that aspect, I would not want to set a precedence of not having that developed.
Commissioner Neblin.
Thank you. And maybe this is more of a question for council, because we've had quite a few comments about the turnaround and how important this is. I mean, one of the concerns I have is the extent to which we can actually exact or require a turnaround in a circumstance like this, where much of the impact that we're talking about here isn't necessarily traceable, at least in my view, to the proposed development itself, but to circumstances that are serious and real and create real problems, but not necessarily. And again, I'm just articulating my own position with respect to it, but I'd be interested in kind of the legal sort of framework we should be applying here.
Well, actually, I think there's two issues here. And I think the first issue has to do with just the street improvements that Commissioner Cooper was talking about, and whether the frontage would be extended. And then the second issue is really the turnaround. And so I don't know if Commissioner Cooper was intending to speak to the turnaround issue like you were, Commissioner Niblin. But on the first issue, there are limitations with respect to the nexus and rough proportionality requirements, that it could be considered to be an unconstitutional exaction to require an improvement that isn't necessary for or isn't related to this project, right? So I can't say necessarily that requiring the street to be extended as just a straight dead-end street would be an unconstitutional exaction, but it's definitely somewhat of a risky proposition in that regard, that could be considered, because the argument would be that it's not necessary to extend the street just with street and gutter and sidewalk all the way to the end as fully improved. But that's different from the turnaround issue, because to the extent that a turnaround could be required, not for solving traffic problems that already exist, but for solving the potential problem for the fire hazard at this site. There is room, I think, if that's where the commission was interested in going, for requiring more of a fire turnaround, fire apparatus turnaround requirement than what is required. Now, the fire marshal has said that he believes that if alternative methods are used as far as construction materials, it will sufficiently solve that problem. But that doesn't necessarily, in the condition of approval is 42, that where it says in the second sentence there, as an alternative to these standards, the fire chief may approve a structure or structures built to the standards of CBC Chapter 7A. That would be the alternative to requiring the fire the fire turnaround. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that has to be the only outcome. And if the commission feels that in order for fire safety reasons that the turnaround is the better solution, there is some room there. So I think, just to summarize what I'm trying to say, is that straight up street improvements, just in order to have those street improvements, potentially problematic. To require improvements in order to prevent fire hazards associated with this development, that's the safer way to go.
Thank you.
That was incredibly helpful. Applicant, did you have anything to say about that?
So just to kind of put the turnaround in perspective, it's, the standard is 96 feet diameter. And I don't know if anyone's familiar with the previous development that was approved here, but it had a big long driveway and a cul-de-sac that dropped in, and it required like a 20-foot retaining wall on the uphill side and a 30-foot retaining wall on the downhill side, and it's horrendous. So I understand that it solves one problem, but I think it creates others.
Chair, if I may interject and consult with the fire chief, there are alternatives to that rather large cul-de-sac that the applicants described that would satisfy the fire apparatus turnaround requirements. So it's not entirely accurate to say that that's the only alternative that could be considered and also comply with the turnaround requirement.
Yes, there are also hammerheads and kind of Y-shaped turnarounds that are, I think a minimum of 120 feet long in like each direction. So it still ends up being significant, right? The property is only 130 feet deep. The right-of-way is certainly not wide enough to support that. It's only 50 feet.
Was the fire chief wanting to speak on this?
If we had a preference, we make every street in the city 35 feet wide, 10 degrees slope, 2 degrees side slope. That isn't the case, okay? The code does provide an opportunity where the construction of a turnaround is not feasible for a list of reasons, one of them being geotechnical or geologically. The reality is in looking at that site, to stay on his property and have a suitable turnaround is maybe impossible without something that he described right there, because you have to have a 60-foot wing on each of those Ys, and if you're just straight up and down, it's 120 foot. So that's a substantial amount of space on a very steep slope in a very bad area. We would love to have it, but I just do not think that it's feasible economically to put it in there. The cost of that might be as much as the cost of the house. And I understand. I mean, Ms. Wormeister can attest that I'm a dog with a bone on this issue. But the reality is sometimes you just can't get there from here.
Thank you very much for that input. Yes.
One more thing on the turnaround, the building code or the fire code does provide in section 503.1 the exceptions, one of which is topography, which is what Chief Johnson is getting at, provided that you provide the alternate means of fire protection, which is building to the 7A standard. So there is, ways to make the findings in the code that Chief Johnson was referencing.
Okay. So it sounds like we've got the tree issue solved, the roof issue solved, the traffic staging issues addressed. We don't have the turnaround. We've got council saying that we have the nexus to require turnaround, but at the same time, we've got the fire marshal saying that it would be a major economic a burden on the applicant. So that's where we're at. Commissioner Neblin.
Well, absent any further discussion or comment, I'd be willing to make a motion along the lines of the bullet points you just laid out without the turnaround requirement and without the street improvement or street extension that I know that Commissioner Cooper was focusing on. But I'd be willing to make that motion, see if there's a second for it.
Make the motion first.
Yeah, I think you'd have to plow through that motion.
Let me see if I can lay it out here. Let's see, what page is the motion here? So I guess I'm on page 20, and we're going to have to do some tailoring of this. Move that the Planning Commission find the project exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act and approve the site development permit, PSD 81416, by adopting the attached resolution, including conditions of approval in Exhibit A, and incorporate all maps and testimony into the record by reference. Provided, however, that we would revise condition of approval. We had two different conditions of approval, I think, that the director had cited.
When was the revision of 19?
Yes. So.
And the addition of a condition related to the construction delivery schedule with the Montessori.
So incorporating both of those changes / additions as set forth. I don't know if we needed to make a specific reference in the motion to the barrel roof being acceptable. I don't know if that.
No,
okay.
It was not a condition to change.
I believe then that would be my motion.
Just is that covering everything we talked about in terms of the arborist report, the arborist plan and the tree plan and the construction staging? Great. Okay. Commissioner Evans.
I will second that motion.
Okay. We've got a motion and a second. Please vote. That motion passes 6-1. Let's see. Anyone agree about the action of the Planning Commission has 10 calendar days to appeal the decision of Reading City Council? Okay, wow. Moving on to Commission communications. I don't see any. I see one. Commissioner Clifford.
I just want to say that I went to the chili and chowder fest at the Pedro Point Fire Station, and it was a blast. There were lots of people there. There was lots of good chili, and I recommend it to everybody for next year.
Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Clifford. Okay, I don't see any more lights. Moving on to staff communications.
So I just have a few things. So I just wanted to remind the commission that the next regular meeting is actually on Tuesday, the 6th, because Monday is Memorial Day. It's a holiday, so just please note that. I wanted to let you know that last council meeting, the council introduced the code changes regarding massage establishments with no changes to the Planning Commission's recommendation, and so that would be set for second reading and adoption in September. The Palmetto Streetscape project is moving forward, and the council heard a very detailed presentation. And that presentation is going on tour, so it's coming to the commissions and committees, and we're probably going to be scheduled to hear that late September or early October. So Public Works and Economic Development will be here to make that presentation. The City Council is going to have a workshop on sea level rise sometime in September. The date still to be determined. And related to sea level rise, the Planning Department applied for and received a Coastal Commission grant for $188,000 to start work on studying sea level rise and adaptation strategies for the community. And so ultimately that will be incorporated into the draft LCP amendments and the general plan process. And so we'll be able to incorporate those into our planning documents. That would just happened Friday, so there's a couple administrative things we have to do to get going, but that'll be moving forward. The City Council will be hearing an update, actually the annual report, first annual report on the Climate Action Plan. And so I'm not sure if any of the commissioners were on that task force, but I just wanted to report back to you that that'll be happening. Second meeting in September, tentatively scheduled. And just an FYI on something that actually is not coming to the commission, but you may hear about it, the tree removal approval for some of the trees outside of the senior apartments, and the name is escaping right now, but at Terra Nova and Odstad. That's actually going to be heard by the PBNR Commission next Wednesday, but that's been getting some press, and so I just wanted to make you guys aware of that. That's going to be going on next week.
Okay, we've got a couple lights. Commissioner Campbell?
All right, quick question. I'd mentioned a couple meetings ago about whether it seemed like there was some interest in having a joint meeting between the City Council, the Planning Commission, and North Coast County Water District. Had it back, I think we did this back in 2008 or 2009. It was really informative then, but it seems even more crucial now considering the drought. And I thought, I don't know if there was any movement on that.
I will mention it again.
I don't know if the commission's interested in doing this, but seems. What's the purpose? The purpose was back then it was to understand really the relationship between our water supply and some of the very large developments that were being proposed, and also earthquake, some earthquake seismic things that we needed to approve, and so it seems even more relevant now than it did back then. So yeah, thought it was useful.
Commissioner Clifford?
Tina, I was wondering if you could tell me when the next library advisory committee meeting is and where it is. I haven't seen anything posted anywhere.
Sure, it is actually, thank you. It is this Wednesday, and it is here in the council chambers.
And one other question.
Will we be seeing the new general plan stuff this year, or yeah, I know we only have a few months left now, and I was wondering if you had any idea when we were actually going to be seeing that coming.
I will need to report back to you on that. I think that there's new planning going on regarding sea level rise. It's obviously a big part of our general plan and our local coastal plan. We have this grant to do studies, and when the city started the general plan update, the Coastal Commission's guidance on sea level rise had not been published, and so things have changed, and staff is in the process of kind of taking a step and looking at all of these things that are going on and what makes sense for the project moving forward in the schedule.
Thank you very much. I thought that was kind of what was happening, but I wanted to get it all out there.
I just want to say thank you guys I think staff did a phenomenal job tonight helping us through some tough stuff, and we were well served by you guys.
Josh, just one question. Tom, were you planning on going to that meeting? I was planning on going.
I just wanted to have it publicly acknowledged when and where.
Thank you.
I think we've reached the end of the road. Commissioner Clifford.
I move we adjourn.
Commissioner Neblin.
Second.
Please vote. We are free.
Thank you. All right. Now you can go eat. Oh, I got kids at home who are like,